Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of the Daily Theologian Podcast. And once again, I am your host, Noah Cantrell. And I have another great guest on here today with me is Dr. Tim Stratton. I have loved your work for a good while now. So like I was telling you the other day, and I first became introduced to your material when I was in college. I took a course, a rough kind of general apologetics type course. And in that, my cousin and I selected the subject to defend. We had to defend it in front of our class and get questioned about it and everything else, which was free will versus determinism.
Oh, that's my favorite.
And we selected that one because it's a subject we would love to study into this. We don't really have good, solid grounding as to why we hold a particular position at that time. It's just kind of what we grew up learning. And
where were you at that time when you started? Were you leaning more deterministic or?
I was definitely free will, but I don't think I could have really defended it. I mean, I could have generally, but I think if somebody that really knew their stuff had approached me and questioned me and cornered me, I don't think I could have defended it adequately.
Yeah.
And so we selected that subject, and I began diving into the issues of Calvinism and various subjects and things like that. And that's actually when I found Leighton Flowers. That was who I was first introduced to.
Yeah.
And Leighton's material was amazing, super helpful to me and my cousin. We had decided beforehand, whichever direction we think truth leads, that's where we're going to go. We don't care if our whole school and our friends and everybody we know is, free will. If we think the Bible genuinely teaches determinism, then that's what we're going to go with.
And where'd you go to school?
I went to Heartland Baptist Bible College.
Where's that at?
It's in Oklahoma City.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Really?
And so we began studying the subject. I got introduced to Leighton Flowers, and in the process came across this concept of Molinism. Just saw a video on it or whatever. And to both of us, I don't know if it was just the way that somebody was presenting it or if there wasn't enough background, about the subject for us to understand it. And we were, found a video that was kind of deep in the rabbit hole already. And we listened to it, and it was, to me, it just sounded like determinism. Like just dressed up in a new way.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, that's dumb. And we just kind of threw it out and continued on with what we were doing. So we did our presentation, everything else. And afterwards, our professor wasn't there that day. It was one of his assistants. It was actually, so a pastor was was one of our professors, and one of his associate pastors was filling in. And he asked us, he goes, "Hey, have you guys ever looked into Molinism?" And we're like, "Yeah, that junk is dumb. Like we saw this video and it's just determinism." And he was like, kind of taken aback, like, okay, that's not, he obviously was like, that's kind of weird to hear that, because he knew more about it than I realized.
Yeah.
And so from then on, I, just kind of didn't think about it. Well, I moved down to Texas, and I was discussing with my pastor some different elements of soteriology and foreknowledge and things like that, and God's relationship to time and everything. And he mentioned Molinism, and I remember being like, "Nah, dude, that's dumb." And he goes, "Hang on a second. You don't know what you're talking about." So he sat me down, and he drew out on his whiteboard a bunch of different stuff and was explaining to me what Molinism actually was, and just kind of really gave me a foundational understanding of it.
And
which
what's his
helped
name?
clear up Pastor Josh Merrill in Weatherford, Texas. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it always brings joy to my heart when I discover a pastor who understands Molinism and his sermons are influenced by it. I could probably count on one hand, definitely two, the amount of pastors I know who are thoroughgoing Molinists. And
it's wild to me.
Yeah, we just need more of them. I mean, I think here's something I'll go out on a limb and say. I think most pastors, like I was having a conversation with a pastor from my area not too long ago, and we were having lunch together. And I gave him a copy of my book, and he said, "Well, Tim, I'm a Calvinist. I'm a compatibilist." And I said, "What do you mean by that? By compatibilist?" And he goes, "Well, I mean that we have this real free will, and that God is sovereign over everything." And I said, "Well, that's my view, but I'm not a compatibilist." And I said, do you know what compatibilism means? I said, compatibilism is the thesis that some kind of free will or moral responsibility is compatible with determinism. And I said, an event is determined if
it's an oxymoron.
well, we'll see. I said an event is determined if prior conditions are sufficient to necessitate it. And so that means it would be impossible for it to be otherwise. And then I took him to 1 Corinthians 10:13. This guy's a senior pastor and a brilliant senior pastor. You're one of the best pastors I've ever seen, to tell you the truth. But there's a difference between a good pastor and analytic theologian, right? Mm-hmm. So I took him to 1 Corinthians 10:13, and I'm sure you and I will talk about this and unpack it more later. But I said, look, according to this, whenever a Christian, a regenerate Christian filled with the Holy Spirit, I said this isn't about salvation, but whenever a Christian is tempted to sin, God will provide him a way of escape so that you don't have to sin. I said, so I want you to think back to your last sin. And I said, don't worry, you don't have to tell me what it is. But think back to that. And did God give you a way of escape so that you didn't have to sin? And he said, yeah, according to this passage, he did. And I said, yeah, so you could have taken that way of escape, right? But you failed to do so. And he goes, yeah. And I said, so you could have done otherwise? And he goes, yep. And I said, well, that's not just freedom. That's called libertarian freedom. You had a real ability to do otherwise, and you didn't do it. And that is incompatible with determinism. And so I said, when you say you're a compatibilist, you are not using that in the way that academics and scholars and theologians use the term. What you actually affirm is my position. And I said, was God surprised when you chose to sin and you didn't have to? And he goes, oh no. I said, when did he learn what you were going to do? And he goes, well, he always knew it. And I said, prior to the foundations of the world? And he goes, well, yeah, he's omniscient. And I said, well, you're a Molinist. I said, you're not a Calvinist compatibilist. You are what I describe as a mere Molinist. So anyway, all that to say, I'm glad to know that you have a pastor that understands this stuff. And I'm saying that I think most pastors probably really are Molinists at the end of the day, but they don't think they are because they've been influenced by these pastors like John Piper or Mark Driscoll or whoever it is that claims to be Calvinist. And so since they're not theologians, they're just good pastors, they are swayed by these popularizers who are also not theologians, at least not in the academic sense, right? Or the scholarly sense. So anyway, sorry, I kind of hijacked your introduction there.
No,
I just get excited when I hear about pastors who are Molinists.
No, that's fine. Yeah. And I mean, he is very academic. So he's very well studied and knows his stuff.
Not your typical pastor.
Yeah. And so I appreciate that about him very much. It's one of the reasons why I'm here at this church. And so.
Oh, so you work for him?
No, I have worked a little bit on staff in the past, but I'm just at the church and heavily involved there. And so,
and you're in Texas, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What's the name of that church? People need to know.
Yeah. Southside Baptist Church in Weatherford, Texas. So it's about 30 minutes from the Fort Worth Metroplex. So the DFW area.
All right. Well, we need to do a conference or something down there sometime so I can meet him.
That'd be cool.
All right.
I'll definitely introduce you guys. That'd be cool. He would love that.
Show him this clip.
Yeah, will do for sure. So he was the one who introduced me to this concept, or at least really kind of made it make more sense and made it not determinism. And so as I started looking into it further, I found William Lane Craig's stuff and I found your stuff and began just from then on, I began binging basically tons and tons of material from you and Craig on this subject. And I've watched I've watched hours and hours and hours of your guys' content.
Really?
And began discussing it with different friends of mine in college and things like that. And so it's been a fun and kind of a passion subject of mine, just because I think it's really important, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And for anybody that might be already lost, like what is Molinism? We're going to define that in just a minute.
We'll get
this is something that I make an objective or a goal on each of my things is that no matter who I'm talking to, I try to keep things brought down to a point where people can understand them. I don't like the term putting the cookies on the bottom shelf, because it almost sounds like you're dumbing it down. I'm not doing that. I want people to stretch their minds, but I also don't want to leave them behind. And so,
and there's a difference. People are like, "Oh, you're so smart." I'm like, actually, I don't think I am. I don't think I have some super high IQ or anything like that, but I'm a nerd who studies this stuff a lot. And there's people that are way smarter than me. And when I say that, I mean, have these probably just fantastically high IQs, that know so much more than I do about other things in the world, many more things than I do. But they just haven't spent the time studying these topics like I have. And so anybody can do this stuff. It's just, I'm a nerd who studies the Star Wars universe and the Marvel Comics universe, and I learn a lot of stuff about all of that, and I apply that same nerdy attributes to the Bible and to theology, and so I've learned a lot about that too. So.
And the funny thing is, you mentioned that I've appreciated you have used analogies and illustrations from those different other nerdy subjects like Star Wars and Marvel. And the funny thing is, if people don't think that the issue we're going to talk about today is relevant, but you watch Marvel movies, then you don't understand the issues, because they are heavily influenced by a particular view of God's relationship to time and the universe and foreknowledge and things like that. I mean, I think of the Loki show whenever it first came out, the first season. I loved that show because it was so philosophical. And I don't know that the average person would have necessarily picked up on that.
Well, and what's the other one? WandaVision? Was that that series too had some deep philosophy, and especially towards the end.
Yeah, and they're teaching you something.
Yeah,
they are teaching you something, and that one was deeply philosophical. And it was the Loki show was season 1. I haven't seen the second one. I don't even know if it's out, but the first season was wrestling with this concept of free will and a predetermined future.
Yeah.
And that gets into your different theories of time, which I'm actually going to deal with Dr. Ryan Mullins here coming up pretty soon. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Learned a lot from him. He's the guy that will sharpen you like iron if you're ever,
he's such a cool guy too. He's fun.
Yeah. Actually sent the last draft of the second edition of my book to him.
This one.
Yeah, that one. The second coming out soon.
Yeah.
And that's the first edition. And so, he had his eyes on. I asked him to specifically look at all the stuff that I was talking about regarding time theory.
That's cool.
Like that. I've had Dr. William Lane Craig as a professor there, but I know that Ryan holds some slightly different views on that stuff, and just wanted to make sure what's funny is my pastor also introduced me to Ryan Mullins. So he and I would debate. My pastor also introduced me to Ryan Mullins. Yeah. And so, because for a long time I took Craig's position on God and time, and I think he's most of the way there. And I would debate my pastor about this all the time. And then he told me to go listen to Ryan Mullins. And so I started listening to a ton of his stuff, and I was like, dang, I think he's right. Like, so I tend to lean more towards Ryan's. Well, what would you say how would you categorize or clarify the differences in their views?
I think the key difference that would be kind of the point of contention is whether or not there's this concept of God creating sans, God existing sans creation, and this idea of there being God timeless before creation, then temporal after creation. And so I think Ryan kind of does a good job of fixing some of the philosophical problems when you try to make that leap there. I think Craig has a lot of other, like the rest of his thing, I think a lot of is really, really good. But I think that there's some contention there and some struggle that I think Ryan does a good job of answering and solving.
Now, Ryan, doesn't he say that time is an attribute of God?
I believe so. And this is what I want to clarify with him and have him kind of break it down.
That'll be good.
But I believe so.
And I am fine with saying that there was a quote unquote moment prior to creation. But I would say that moment is categorically different than moments since creation. And so then I think we could say, well, okay, God existed in a static state of time, almost like you'd think of the B theory time, where things aren't happening. But then so things aren't happening sans creation, but simultaneous with creation, the clock starts ticking. And so I would call that dynamic time, where you could say, well, there's no time sans creation, or God is timeless sans creation. Or you could say, well, yeah, there's time, but it's not passing moments where things are changing, or where you could measure change. It's because nothing's happening. But then when God says, let there be, the clock starts ticking, and now you've got dynamic time. So I think you could say, well, yeah, there's time, but it's a different kind of, a different quality of time. It's a static time versus dynamic time. And we exist in dynamic time now. But I think it's just, a lot of it's semantics, but it's important.
And
I think
this is one of the things he talks about is like,
yeah,
also defining what time is one of the hardest philosophical things to do.
Right.
And so that's what I want to talk to him about, get him to clarify some things, ask some
questions.
Well,
he's the expert on it. I study it a lot. You have to be a Molinist.
Yeah, it is important.
Yeah, you have to understand at least some big points about some big issues.
Determinism directly is directly tied to, whether you realize it or not, it is philosophically tied to the B theory of time. And so
it can be, but it doesn't have to be. So I would say if B theory is true, then determinism follows. Dr. Craig disagrees with me.
Really?
Actually.
Really? Okay. I thought that by definition, just given the way that B theory, and again, the way that B theory is structured, given that like all times are happening simultaneously and all of that,
and there's no free will. No
right,
liberty.
then that would necessitate determinism, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So it seems to me we're kind of jumping right ahead,
I know,
long jumping over everything I think you wanted to talk about, but who cares? Let's roll with it.
Yeah, people can kind of skip over this to the intro in a minute. I'll have chapter headings and stuff. So if this is too much, then we'll come back to it later.
Yeah, we were planning on doing an introduction and all this stuff, and somehow we're just like, man, we're going deep.
This will give you a preview of what we're gonna talk about. If you're not understanding what's going on right now, then just wait a minute. We'll define things and clarify some stuff. And
hang with us, please. Okay, I forgot what was the question?
Does B theory of time necessitate determinism?
Okay. So this is my contention. If the B theory of time means the block theory universe, right, where it's almost like a frozen fish aquarium, right? Imagine a big fish aquarium and it's frozen, so frozen that the subatomic particles aren't even moving. There's nothing happening, right? Just completely static. And you've got all these worms in it, and all these worms are real. I mean, what we experience as moments is just different slices of these worms, but the worm that is what really the totality of you, from beginning at your birth and your death, are the two ends of the worm. I know this sounds weird. It is weird. But imagine if that worm that was in the fish tank, and then it got frozen, and so now it's just stuck. And that's you. And when you slice up, when the little slices are moments, and that's what we experience as us moving, but it's an illusion. We're not really moving. The worm is stuck and frozen and static. So we experience sensations of movement that are false on the B theory of time. And it seems to me that our actions then are necessitated via antecedent conditions, or maybe it doesn't work to say antecedent because there's nothing happening prior, but our actions are necessitated by just the structure of the block. And so there's nothing I, as a slice of that worm, can do to change the end of the worm, would represent my death. Nothing I can do about it. It's just there. And it's like I'm going down a water slide.
This is the whole premise of the movie Tenet.
Have
you seen Tenet?
I haven't.
Oh my goodness!
I needed to.
Oh my goodness! If you absolutely, because this is the whole premise of the movie. In fact, I wrote down the main point or thrust of the whole film, because the idea is, if anybody that hasn't seen it, or for you, for example, it's half the world is moving forward in time, the other half of the world is moving backwards in time, and it's the issue of like forwards and entropy and backwards entropy and all these different things, and but it creates this kind of conundrum of, well, hang on a second. And you have to see it like multiple times to really kind of start wrapping your head around what he's doing. But there are things that are happening forward, and then people will get into this machine and it reverses their entropy. So then now they feel like they're moving forwards, but to everybody else, it looks like they're moving backwards. So, for example, you have a car chase scene, and they're chasing this car forwards, and the car that they're chasing is driving backwards. And then they get into a machine later, and they turn it around, and then they're the car that's was driving backwards, but now they're forward, and so it messes everything. But here's the thing that comes into play with that is, and they explicitly come to this at the end of the film, is they say, I had a note where I actually quoted I wrote it down. I'll probably just remember it, but he asked about like, okay, well, what about free will though? Because one of them says, hey, what's happened has happened. You can't change that, because he's getting ready to go to a point where this guy knows that he's going to die. And he's like, but wait, can't we change it? And he's like, well, no, what's happened has happened, even though it hasn't happened yet. And he goes, what about free will? And he goes, we're just expressions of faith in the mechanics of the world. It's not an excuse to do nothing.
And so that's really
and so it's a deterministic concept, but at the same time, he's saying that, well, yeah, but your choices still matter, even if you don't feel like they do, or even if logically they don't. And it's like, it's just a contradiction.
Really?
It doesn't. It sounded neat in the film, but when you think about it, it's like, no. So a lot of people didn't realize that movie is deeply, deeply philosophical in like the theory of time. It's probably, you know how every movie that tries to portray the B theory of time, and for people listening, A theory of time is basically an oversimplification to say it's presentism. The only thing that exists is the present. Past doesn't exist because it's gone. Future doesn't exist because it hasn't happened yet. Yeah. B theory of time is that all time exists kind of as a block, simultaneous. So you are just as real now as you are 10 minutes ago, as you are 3 years from now. Yeah. Hitler is still just as real as you are currely,
just in a different
part of the block of time. Yeah.
And my death is just as real as my birth. If evolution is true from a single-celled common ancestor, a lot of atheists, I'm not opposed to God creating through evolution at all, but for atheism, they have to have Darwinian evolution, and that's their holy grail that they need. And also, a lot of them, to avoid the implications of the Kalam cosmological argument, I think this is not all of them, but many of them jump to, well, I'm a B theorist. So they think going to B theory of the block theory of time is going to get around the implications of the Kalam cosmological argument. This is my experience. So I'm not going to say that this is true across the board, but with these atheists who are trying to appeal to the scientific theory of static block theory or B theory, along with their evolution, I point out that on their view, if the block never came into existence, then they are just as old or ageless as the single-celled common ancestor. And so how does that explain their biological complexity today? It's just on a different side of the block. And it's not even like you have to be looking at the block from one side to the other. You could just as well be looking at it from that side to the other side. But we aren't really, our existence isn't explained by change over time, because there is no time, at least in a dynamic sense, which I contend you need on Darwinian evolution. And so those two ideas are radically opposed to each other. And ultimately, all the data, I say, well, that it points to Christianity, even if God created through evolution. That's another topic we could talk about. That's a big if also. I'm not saying he did. I'm just saying if.
And the reason that this is important, this understanding of B theory and A theory time, because a lot of people are like, okay, who cares, whatever, it's not that big of a deal. Well, everything you watch is teaching something. So Marvel operates on the B theory of time. Every time travel movie you have ever seen operates on the B theory of time. And the reason for that is because you cannot have time travel backwards. Okay. I'll say you cannot have time travel backwards, because the past doesn't exist unless you have some form of this block theory of time that it exists to go back to.
And we can have time travel moving forwards.
I would say because
at the exact same speed that we're doing it right now.
Yeah. There's that. I was also going to say, if you wanted to take the the different theories of traveling forwards in time through, like, say, the two brothers, that one goes to the distant star and comes back and he's older and the other one's younger. I mean, technically you could say that one of them time traveled, but that's not what is being implied in these films. That's not what's going on.
Here's what I want to say. I think that time travel is metaphysically impossible on the A or B theory of time. I'm willing to have my mind changed on that. I'd like to have my mind changed on it because my favorite movies are time travel movies. I love them, right? But I really have to just suspend what I know, my knowledge of metaphysics and time theory, when I watch time travel movies, just because they're so much fun. But think about it. If it's a block theory of time, all right, yeah, so you're right. On presentism, or the A theory of time, there's no past to go back to. We can't go 100 years into the future tomorrow in a time machine either, right? Because that doesn't exist yet. It will, but it doesn't exist yet. 100 years ago existed, but it doesn't exist right now. So there's nowhere to go back to. But if B theory is true, there is a part of the block that exists right now that we would call the future. The end of the worm where I exist, right? Or the end of these slices that make up this worm. I know that sounds weird to new people here. And then, we've got the past, the beginning of the worm for my existence. So now, if that's stuck and static and it doesn't move, right, which is what static means, could I go back into time? Well, really, I think the only way that that's possible is to think of that worm as a water slide. And so imagine yourself going down the water slide at the water park. It's almost like asking, could you crawl up? Even if that was hard to do with the water coming down and everything, could you work your way back up the water slide? Yeah. I mean, when I was a little kid, I used to do that kind of stuff, when I could get away with it. But then could I change the structure of the water slide? No, I would have to go right back down in the same way that I did. So I think it becomes really hard to try to make sense of time travel in the past, even on a B theory, because if it's truly static and stuck and frozen, for lack of a better word, you can't change the past. You would just be crawling up the water slide. I could be wrong. Do you see? Does it make sense to you what I'm trying to communicate here?
Yeah, it gets really complicated really fast. There's a lot of philosophical and logical problems with time travel. Yeah. Okay.
Do you see any problems though with what I say? Because I mean, I'm not going to die on that hill. I'm just kind of expressing how it seems to me. If the B
I think I understand
what
you're saying, and based on what I'm gathering, I would agree with what you're saying. But I haven't. I don't know. That'd be an interesting question to talk to, like Dr. Mullins on, and see what his thoughts on that.
Yeah, see what he thinks.
Hypothetically, could you? Because obviously he's not a B theorist.
No.
I wonder if he would say as far as like the logical consistencies of B theory of time.
I'll tell you, the first debate I ever had that was live and in person. Guess who was
I know, it was James White. I watched it.
No, technically not true.
Really? I thought that was your first one.
William Lane Craig.
Really? I didn't know that. I thought that
it wasn't a formal debate.
Okay.
So this is in 2015, I think. I just graduated from Biola, and I'd had Dr. Craig for some classes, even on time. But then I was, so I became part of Reasonable Faith. I still am a chapter director for Reasonable Faith. And so once a year, we all get together as chapter directors and Dr. Craig. And so this is the first one I went to after joining Reasonable Faith. And so there's, I don't know, 30 or 40, I don't know, just say there's 30 of us chapter directors, maybe a few other people in this room. And Dr. Craig gave a talk to us. And then he said, well, let's open it up for questions. And I think it was Tyson James. I can't remember for sure, but people start texting me because they knew that I was thinking some of these things through, and they're like, ask him about your thoughts on if we could have free will if the B theory is true and stuff. Because I say no, we can't. And Dr. Craig says yes, we can. And I was like, no, we can't. But they're like, ask him. I'm like, no, I'm not going to ask him. And I'm getting these texts, and so finally I'm like, all right, Dr. Craig, I'm nervous because I still barely have had him as a professor, but don't really know him yet. And he's like, yes, Tim. And so I asked him about that. He answered, he goes, oh, no, we can have libertarian free will even on the B theory, even though we both think the B theory is false. So we agree,
right?
The A theory is true, the B theory is false. But now we're disagreeing on if the B theory were true, could we have free will in a libertarian sense? Dr. Craig says yes, I say no. And so I ask a question, he answers. I find myself pushing back, which was crazy. He pushes back, and I'm like, but wait. And then I realize what is going on here. And we were in a little debate for several minutes going back and forth. And I just found myself, my legs just shaking. I'm like, what's going on? Back in this 10 years ago. And so I like to say he was my first introduction to a live debate was an impromptu back and forth with Dr. Craig. But I still, 10 years later, hold to my position with one slight caveat. I would say that some kind of a block theory could be compatible with idealism, where it's not a physical block, but I call it an idealistic block, a virtual block. And if that's the case, then all bets are off. So if idealism is true, and this would get into like guys like Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy, he's actually a B theorist, idealist, and a Molinist.
So what is idealism?
That matter doesn't really exist, or the way we think it does. Anyway, that the foundation of physical reality isn't atoms and subatomic particles. It's, I'd say, maybe they'd say it's information, which is a non-physical substance. So it'd be more like existing in the Matrix, kind of like that. It's not a perfect analogy because obviously there's a material world where their bodies are plugged in and stuff. But if you're just talking about the Matrix, the virtual reality where Neo realizes there is no spoon, and so he can do whatever he wants there. When your mind really understands there's nothing here, sure seems like it. And I can interact with you like we really are here. And I can't get shot with bullets and get run over by a car, but I can fly. Things like that.
It's like a lucid dream.
Yeah, I mean, except it's much more than that.
Right.
So anyway, I don't have Michael Jones on your show. I actually want to have him on my show. I've talked to him about having him on soon to talk about this, his idealism, his B theory view, and Molinism. And so I haven't asked him. I'm just kind of at this point trying to think, how does he do that? And I think you could make sense of free will and in a sense, if you've got a virtual block that's not, it wouldn't be static that way, static in the way that a frozen aquarium would be if it's virtual. And then it could change. It would be dynamic then. It could change in a dynamic sense. So you could have a weird hybrid of a virtual B block, and a dynamic time, it seems to me, where you can change the. Now, look, I don't think the reality is like that. I'm just being a philosopher thinking about all the crazy what ifs. So anyway, I've never talked about this stuff on YouTube before, I don't think. So
that's fun.
Congratulations. I'm probably wrong about all of it.
I love talking about this. It would be, dude, it'd be so much fun is get you and Ryan Mullins on here, and then you can kind of pick his brain about some of this stuff because you've studied these like on a philosophical level a lot deeper than I have. And so it'd be fun to hear kind of.
Well, I would like to, pick Ryan's brain and his immaterial mind as well on these issues, because he is an expert on time theory. I am not. And so that's why I'm like I know enough about it to make me dangerous.
Mm-hmm. That would make a fun conversation. I mean,
yeah.
We could work something like that out. I mean, that'd be a blast.
We should probably talk about the stuff that I am an expert on.
All right, so let's do this. Let's do a great big restart.
Okay.
And all right, so if anybody wanted, I'll leave chapter markers. So if anybody wanted to, they can jump ahead and get past the fun random conversation. But anyway, the B theory of the Tenet is probably one of the most consistent films on the B theory of time is what I was getting at, my opinion there. But all right, so Dr. Tim Stratton, tell us who you are, where you're at, what your background is educationally, what you're doing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Tim Stratton, got my PhD in theology with emphasis on systematic theology and analytic theology back in 2020. Before that, I got my master's degree at Biola University in 2014. And that whole journey started in 2008 because I was a youth pastor at the time. And my high school and college students were asking really tough questions about theology and then starting to bring really tough objections against Christianity and the Bible and the existence of God. And I couldn't answer any of these things. These were good questions and objections. And I started seeing even some of the kids that I thought were kind of the leaders in my youth group falling away from the faith, becoming atheists, and some of them becoming kind of aggressive atheists at that. So that really sparked something in me because I thought a lot of their objections were really good. It really shook my faith as a youth pastor. And I would say my faith was weakened because of it for a while. And I was like, I got to see if there's answers to these questions and these objections, because it just seemed to me that if Christianity was really true, then there would be good answers. And I realized, I'd go to my other colleagues, pastoral colleagues at the church. It was a big church. And I started asking the other pastors there. They've never heard of these objections before. The senior pastor, awesome, one of the best pastors ever. He didn't know how to answer these. Started going to other churches in town. No luck. Started looking at churches in some of the bigger cities around here, going to Lincoln and Omaha. Nobody could answer these questions. And I was like, wow, maybe they're right, and so I started, doing internet searches, and finally some guy named William Lane Craig came up and showed some of his debates against these well-known atheists. And so I watched one of them and I was like, wow, I didn't understand any of it. But what I did understand, I didn't understand the substance, but I understood body language at the time. And what I'll never forget is how cocky and arrogant the atheist was when he first got up there. And how Dr. Craig, his first speech was, he was confident. He didn't come across as arrogant, at least didn't to me. But he talked about all the scientific stuff and gave all this philosophical jargon, talking about logic. And again, it didn't make any sense to me, but I was like, well, wow, I just saw a really smart guy defend Christianity, defend the existence of God and the truth of Christianity. I don't know really how he did it because I don't understand these cosmological things, but interesting. And then I watched the atheist get up, and he was so cocky when he got up there. And then Dr. Craig gets up for his second speech, and he's almost like laughing, like, well, look, I said this, and my opponent hasn't even tried to address this yet. And then I brought this argument up, and he avoided that. And so if he wants to win this debate, he's going to have to address this point, this point, this point, and this point. And so far, he's done nothing. Now, let me tell you what he did say. He said this, this, and this. Well, let me tell you why that's false. And then he just takes all of those down. And then he ends his second speech by saying, so if my atheist opponent wants to win today, he needs to do two things. He needs to take down my arguments, which he hasn't touched any of them yet. And then he has to show how I've taken down his arguments. And then he has to defeat what I've just done to his arguments. Good luck with that. And then he goes and sits down, and the atheist comes up, and he's not cocky anymore. He's shaking, right? And he's red and he's sweating. And then Dr. Craig comes back up, and he's like, well, here we go again. And he did the same thing. And then at that point, the atheist comes up, and he's just you could just tell he didn't want to be there anymore. Now, look, I didn't understand any of it at the time, but I was like, this is great. I've been told by all these teenagers that, Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Hawking and fill in the blank with your favorite atheist that they've been watching on YouTube back then were destroying Christianity. And then I watched this guy, Dr. William Lane Craig, go against some guy that they were calling the Christian killer or something like that in an academic debate. And I was like, okay, I didn't understand any of that, but let me watch the next one. And so I just started getting hooked on his debates and watching one after another. And then, I'll never forget some of my students that were becoming atheists were really advancing Christopher Hitchens stuff. So then it was time to watch Dr. Craig versus Christopher Hitchens. And at that time, I'd watched enough that I was starting now to understand the Kalam cosmological argument and the moral argument and all these other arguments, the fine-tuning argument, all these other arguments that Dr. Craig brought up and the historical case for the resurrection, starting to understand just a little bit. And this guy, Christopher Hitchens, who was just supposed to be, he was known as one of the four horsemen of atheism. I mean, even atheists, well-known atheists were saying that Hitchens got spanked, all right? Direct quote. And it was clear to everybody. And so my world is just getting changed as this youth pastor back in the day who's realizing, wow, we have really smart people who can defend God's existence and the truth of Christianity against the toughest critics. So I was like, I went on a journey, started in 2008 to see if Christianity really was true or if it's just the way I was raised, right? And I was like, turns out I was raised correctly, right? So one of the atheists' arguments is, oh yeah, well, if you would have been raised in, in China, you would have been an atheist. I'm like, so would that make atheism false if you were raised as an atheist? Somebody's got to be raised right, yeah, I just started seeing these objections weren't really good. Anyway, went to Biola then to learn from Dr. Craig and JP Moreland and these other guys, and that led to the PhD. So I'm not in church ministry anymore. After I graduated 10 years ago, I started a ministry called Free Thinking Ministries. So I have a website called freethinkingministries.com, also known as freethinkinc.org. That's freethinkinc.org. And we also have a YouTube channel like you do. This one's called Free Thinking Ministries. So check us out. Subscribe to our stuff. I'm now writing books as well. Talked about one or two of them already today. I've just signed 2 contracts with the academic press a couple of weeks ago. So we're working on some really cool projects right now, including some with other scholars. So that's the stuff I'm doing now. I love talking about apologetics. I love talking about theology and analyzing theology, making sure that it's a systematic approach, that it's logically coherent, that if I say theological proposition X, it does not contradict theological proposition Y. I love putting these puzzle pieces together to make sure that we have just a sound, systematic theology. And so, yeah, I'm a big nerd who likes that stuff. So it's a little bit about me.
Yeah. And I've been, like I said, I've been watching your stuff for several years now, and it's been a tremendous help to me and very educational. And I've grown and learned a lot through your work and your podcast and channel and books and different things.
Thanks, brother. I really am encouraged.
Yeah. So I'm honestly just really grateful that you'd come on and give me the time to talk about some of these things. So
anytime, man. Anytime.
It's really fun. It's funny because you have so much of an. People talk about this idea all the time, but you have so much of an online presence that I've listened to you for so long that whenever we're talking on the phone the other day, it's like I feel like I know this guy and we've talked forever, but you don't know me. I don't have the same online presence as you, and so it's this weird, I guess, feeling. These people that are on YouTube and things, and you hear them and you see them all the time, and then it. But
you and I had a quick phone call just to set this up, and we became fast friends. You're just easy to get to know and like, and it's good to call you a friend already. I think I can do that. So.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You used to something you left out. Now you used to be an MMA fighter too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I wasn't great.
No, okay.
I mean, I was okay. I was a better coach than I think it was really good sparring partner. I'll say that. But who could give a lot of guys a run for their money and give them different things to look at, and just really train them to get prepared for their next opponent. But yeah, I grew up doing karate. I started in taekwondo when I was really little. When I was older, then I got into the Chuck Norris system of karate that he was teaching at the time, and it was like full contact karate, but it's still like point system where you'd stop after every hard hit. But I mean, you could strike anywhere to the body, including below the belt, so you couldn't just be kicking high all the time. You had to really protect yourself, and so it was painful. But then I got into jujitsu after that, and then I started getting into wrestling. Actually, in my late 20s, I'd go, and University of Nebraska at Kearney always has a team that's threatening to win the championship. We do win it out here quite a bit, so we got great wrestlers. Kamaru Usman was a friend of mine who wrestled for UNK, and we would train together. He's a UFC champion, for one of the best champions ever. But my point is I trained in martial arts for a long time. I'm finally old enough that I got tired of getting punched in the face. So now my martial arts are a 3-gun competitions where we take AR-15s and your sidearm and a shotgun, and you go out and run these obstacle courses and shoot as many things as you can while staying safe and trying to be as fast as you can at the same time. And that brings me a lot of joy right now. That's my number one hobby.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. It's funny. I was listening to the interview that Joe Rogan did with Mark Zuckerberg, and they were talking about martial arts and things. And I think Joe was saying that he knows several people that were fighters that ended up becoming like philosophy professors. And he was I don't know. He goes, you would think that some of these people, people think of fighters and they're like, just basically meatheads, just people just go around getting punched and punching. And he's like, no, some of the most brilliant people I know are fighters. It was really funny.
Because I talk about free will all the time. I don't think we exercise a lot of freedom in the octagon. I had a few fights, 2 in an octagon, and I was 1-1. Yeah. So won 1 and lost 1, broke my hand, and that one I lost. No. That was a bummer. And after that one, I was in my 30s, and I was like, I'm not. This is a young man's game, and I'm just gonna coach people up at this point. But there's a lot of intellectual. There's a big intellectual part of the game that you use while you're practicing and planning and analyzing. The free will comes in the early stages, and then you freely choose to think about these things and consider the different possibilities and what you would do if then, and that's where a lot of the cognitive stuff is going on. Then you get into the octagon and you touch gloves, and there's not a lot of thinking going on. It's reacting. There's some, there's maybe a little bit, but not nearly as much as the planning period. So I am a libertarian. That means I think that determinism is false. That means that I don't think that all things about me and my mental state and physical actions are determined by prior conditions. I believe that I am the source of some of my thoughts and actions, and I can take control of my thoughts and actions at least occasionally. But there's a lot of times when I act that antecedent prior conditions are sufficient to necessitate those things. And I think we see that in real time quite a bit in athletic competition. So to Joe Rogan's point, you'll see a lot of really smart guys in the sport of MMA. And in fact, if you're just a meathead, there's some guys that the structure of their neck and shoulders and jaw and everything, they're just built to take punishment, but they're not really good fighters. But they can just get in there and bang, and if they happen to hit you, he's going to do damage, but he's not you don't have to be smart to do that. And there's some of those guys out there who can take a lot of damage. They're just tough, right? But they're not technical. But then there's guys who are brilliant and study and train their bodies and are genetically gifted. I mean, there's some guys who just, I am not. I mean, like Kamaru Usman, this other guy I trained with named Dakota Cochran. I mean, these guys are just put together differently. They're built differently. And so I can train with them, train just as hard as them. But at the end of the day, God built them a little bit differently. And so if they train, there's some of those guys that don't train hard. They just rely on their God-given gifts. And if I don't have those God-given gifts, but I train harder and smarter, then we can be equal. But if you take those same guys that are built differently and they train as hard as or harder than the other guy, you just can't beat them. Right? They're the Olympic athletes, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, I don't even know. Oh, it doesn't take much to get me derailed. Just to be talking about things that.
Well, then, so how did you go from that to the fighting kind of area to studying philosophy and specifically Molinism?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think I do. I was doing martial arts since I was a little kid. When I was little, I was the skinny kid. I was the smallest kid in my grade, smaller than all the girls, and I would get beat up and bullied all through middle school. Then I started doing taekwondo and karate, and I started standing up to all the bullies. And one of the biggest bullies in the school one day decided to beat me up on the playground, and I wound up knocking him out. And I was like 90 pounds at the time, and just knocked him out. He was bloody, And I didn't. I tried to get away, and the kids all make this big circle, and they kept throwing me back. And I'm like trying to get out, and they're throwing me like, no, we want to see a fight. Smallest kid in the school against the biggest kid in the school. And I remember praying. I'm like, God, I need you here. It was David and Goliath, and then I knocked him out. He's just laying there with blood all over his face, and I was like, I really did this. And all the kids that wanted to see the fight lifted me up and put me on their shoulders and took me home.
It's like a movie.
It was like a movie, and my life kind of started to change. I didn't get picked on in high school anymore. And then in college,
how old were you when that happened?
I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
And then, I was about probably second semester of 8th grade, so shortly before high school started. And then in college, my freshman year of college, I really started getting bigger. I started lifting, and I was still doing martial arts and everything, but I started to get more athletic then because I was working hard in the gym, and I've continued out after all these years. I work out every day. But how did I get into? Well, okay, so I gave my life to Christ. Like, I was a Christian growing up. I prayed the prayer when I was 3, right before my 4th birthday. But I dedicated my life to being a Jesus freak. I was impacted by the DC Talk song, Jesus Freak. Which is sad because I don't know if you know about Michael Tate and all that kind of stuff today, but he was a huge influence in my life back when I was 20 and in my 20s, him and the DC Talk guys. And now he's it's a really sad story. But anyway, that song, God used it I was like, I am going to be a Jesus freak. No more living a double life. And that's when I dedicated my life to living for Christ 24/7 and to ministry. And I didn't think I was going to go into vocational ministry at that time, but I was like, no, my life is dedicated to telling people about Jesus at this point. And so, that was when I was big into, I was in college. I was competing in big karate tournaments and stuff at the time, winning a lot of those. Teaching. Then I started teaching. I was making money doing karate and stuff. During that time, that's when the UFC #1 came out, and I was like, what is this jujitsu stuff that this Hoist Gracie guy is doing? I got to learn it. And so, yeah, my whole world was karate and Jesus during that time, and just radically changing me. And so, yeah, I went in eventually into ministry, into youth ministry. First started my first youth ministry job was 1998, right out of college. And then in 2008, 10 years later, after this my third different youth ministry gig in 10 years, that's when the kids started bringing me with all these atheist objections. And I'll tell you, the same competitive nature, this is how they're connected. That same competitive nature that I had and remembering what it was like to get bullied as a young kid. And I felt like atheists were bullying my kids in my youth group. And so now, me being in a different position of me being a shepherd, I'm a shepherd who's supposed to protect the sheep against wolves, right? And I saw there's wolves coming after my kids, and this is a matter of life and death for eternity, right? So that same, I mean, I can feel the fire burning in me right now. Just get me, that same competitive nature where I was like, all right, you want to fight? Back in the martial arts days, I would do anything possible to avoid a fight. I don't like to fight. I'm honest. I don't like to fight. I would do anything possible to avoid it. But if somebody just kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me like we did in that fight I just told you about, I'm like, fine. You want to fight? It's going down, and I'm going to win. I had that that mindset, and I'll do anything to win. And when I felt like now it's not just a physical thing, they're going after the souls of my kids, the sheep in my youth group. I had that same fire. And so then that's what I think pushed me into, first I wanted to see, can we defend, talking about self-defense, can we defend Christianity? Well, if it's true, we've got to be able to. And so, I got into that. And then it just moved more, I don't really consider myself an apologist anymore. I still do apologetics, but I'm more now, I just refer to myself as a theologian, or systematic or analytic theologian. But yeah, it's still that drive for truth, to know truth. I believe that, as Scripture says, truth will set you free, and I want to see humans. I want to free people from captivity. It is. I'll tell you what, it's a spiritual war, and I think my training in martial arts, and even what I continue to, I still train with the local SWAT team. So I still am engaged in like physical combat scenarios all the time. I never went into law enforcement, but I almost did. Really close to doing that, but I still, to this day, I'm the only civilian that's on the committee here to decide what local police officers and deputies move to the SWAT team. And I'm training with the SWAT team and stuff now. I do get to do the drills with them, get to play the bad guy. Sometimes they let me be a cop and go against other bad guys just so I can learn what it's like to be in their shoes or their combat boots. But I still, I see that training in the physical world, and then I bring that over into the spiritual world, and I don't want to fight. It's like a good police officer. He doesn't want to bring violence. But he's able to, if it's the most loving thing to do in that situation. And that's at least that's the way it should be. And that's how I try to approach things too. Even in theology debates, like if you go to my website, you'll see this last week I put 5 long responses where I find, there's to a fellow Christian, but he sees things way differently than I do. And he's been trying, for lack of a better term, trying to pick a fight with me for a few years now. And finally I was like, I don't want to, but fine, here we go. So it's kind of that same approach.
So at what point did you get introduced to this concept of Molinism and start diving into that? Because you wrote your dissertation on it. So
yes.
When did you get introduced to it?
Was introduced to it. Okay. Well, I talked about that debate with William Lane Craig and Christopher Hitchens, right? So at that time, I'm watching it just to see if Christians could defeat atheism at the time. And I'm watching this Christopher Hitchens, Dr. Craig debate, and Christopher Hitchens, again, one of the 4 horsemen of atheism, going to kill Christianity. And I'm watching this debate. Dr. Craig is just kicking his butt. It's just clear that Dr. Craig is just, as others have said, just spanking him. But at one point in the debate, I could tell that Hitchens was trying to put Craig trying to get him into a corner finally, trying to score some points on him. Now, let me say, at the time, I'm a hardcore Calvinist, right? And all my colleagues at the church where I was working,
I
all
forgot
Calvinists.
about that. I forgot that you came from the Calvinist background.
Yeah. I wasn't just a Calvinist. I was what I refer to as an exhaustive divine determinist, or EDD, an ed guy, right? I believe God determined everything and there was no such thing as free will, right? So I assumed, I thought, well, this is the intellectual position. I was loving John Piper and Mark Driscoll and all these other, I think I mentioned some of those pastors earlier. R.C. Sproul, I'm really getting into his stuff. And I was like, well, just the intellectual. If you're going to be an intellectual Christian, you've got to be a Calvinist. And so I held that view for years, led to many fights with my wife because she was raised Arminian. And it got to the point where, we're just not going to talk about this. And sometimes I wondered if she was even saved, because why in the world isn't God making her know the truth of Calvinism? Anyway, where was I going with that? I forgot.
You're talking about like you were hardcore Calvinist, and then you were watching this debate with Craig.
Hitchens is trying to put Dr. Craig in a corner and basically says, I can't remember exactly, but he's like, well, name one thing that you disagree with a lot of Christians about or something. I can't even remember the context. And Dr. Craig was like, well, I don't think Calvinism's true. And I was like, oh, no, I was loving this guy. Now I don't even know if you're a Christian anymore, And so I watched the rest of the debate with really mixed emotions at that point. And then I don't know when Google came out, but I didn't use Google a lot at that time, but I went to Google and I'm like, William Lane Craig, Calvinism. I didn't even know what else to write. And all this stuff started coming up on Molinism. And, so that was the first time I'd ever even heard, or at that point read the word Molinism. It's like, Molinism, what? And
when was that? How many years ago was that?
Let's see, I'm going to guess sometime in 2008 or 2009 when I was first, I think it was 2009 when I watched that debate, somewhere in there. Because then it was, I think, 2010. And if I get my dates wrong, I know how we can find out for sure, when I first said, okay, now I think I'm a Molinist. Because it was when the Green Bay Packers played the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Super Bowl. Because I did have a friend who was a pastor from another town here in Nebraska, like an hour and a half away. And he was a philosophy. He has his master's degree in philosophy, and he was a pastor. So he was a deep thinker, and he was my age. And he drove to Kearney to be at the Super Bowl party with us at our church where I was at the time. And we put on a huge party for Super Bowl every year. Lots of wings and pizza and everything. That's just so much fun. Anyway, he and I are watching the game, and for the first 3 quarters, we're just talking about Molinism, Calvinism, Determinism, libertarian freedom, and all that. And he had a pretty good grasp of it. I don't know if he would have called himself a Molinist, but he knew enough to help explain it to me, because I had still some misconceptions. This is after, and I say that I studied it from first being introduced to it after watching that debate, and then trying to disprove it. So I was studying it, being introduced to it, I was studying it close to every day, trying to refute it, trying to find out what's wrong with it, because it's got to be wrong. And so almost every day trying to show what's wrong with it. But then I got to the point where the Super Bowl was going on. I'm sitting there with my friend who's a pastor and a philosopher. And for the first 3 quarters, we're talking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I remember it was between the 3rd and the 4th quarter when I just felt like a light bulb go on, and I kind of sat back on the couch and I said out loud, I think I'm a Molinist. And I remember after I said that, I thought, well, that means the players I'm watching have free will. Now I said, earlier that I don't know how much free will we're exercising in competition. But at that point, I was like, I'm watching players who God isn't determining anyway. It changed everything. I remember watching it in different color. It was a new color to me. Now, did I have a good grasp of it still? No, but that was the point where I knew enough where I finally said, I'm a Molinist now. I do have free will. And saying I have free will. I mean, it's like, it's almost like Neo in the Matrix to bring that up again. Like when he realized the power he had, he didn't know he had these powers. And he's like, I can do this stuff. I mean, I'm like, I have free will. It's a power. It really is. I argue now that it's a supernatural power that we have, that we only have because we are created in the image and likeness of God. And that's why as far as we know, nothing else on the planet or in the universe has the kind of freedom we do. And that is what sets us apart from the animals. And yeah, with this image of God, it is supernatural power. As J.P. Moreland has said in the past, when we exercise our libertarian freedom, we are doing many miracles. And so we get to see miracles every day when you exercise your libertarian freedom. So anyway, yeah, well, I think, did I answer your question sufficiently?
So then from there, yeah. So then from there, you just decided to go to school and study this full time?
Yeah. So that's when, I mean, I was still so new to all of that. I didn't even realize you could get master's degrees and doctorates in philosophy or things like that. I was really sheltered from that stuff. But I remember, so I'm in my basement in my house right now, and I was just standing right over there. When I ordered, I think it was that debate, the Hitchens, Craig debate. I really think that was it. I know I ordered several of his debates, and I cracked that DVD case open, and this little postcard comes flying out, landed on my feet right over here. And I remember picking it up. It said, go to school at Biola and learn apologetics from William Lane Craig, J.P. Moreland, Clay Jones. It goes down the list of everybody. And I was just like, I remember yelling, my wife was upstairs. I'm like, honey, I know what I'm supposed to do. And I was like, I have no idea how I'd pay for this or anything else. But I was like, I felt like God was telling me. I mean, it just felt like this little postcard I'm looking at was changing my life. And I'm like, I have to find a way to go here. And, God opened up the doors, and so that's why I went there, to learn apologetics so I could answer the questions my high school and college kids were bringing to me. And while I was there studying apologetics, this is where the Molinism stuff really comes in, because Clay Jones taught this class on the problem of evil. And I took this class really seriously because this was one of the main objections that the students were throwing my way. If God is perfectly good, loving, powerful, and intelligent and knowledgeable, why would he let all of this evil happen in the world? And I, especially when I was a Calvinist at the time, when I first heard it, I was like, well, because God makes it happen. But they were like, that's a horrible response. They're like, that makes God the author of evil. And I tried to find ways. So, well, no, not really. And do you think that, Tim, Pastor Tim, don't you say that God determines everything? Well, yeah. Does evil happen in the world? Well, yeah. So does God determine it? Well, no, I'm trying to get away from, like, okay, it's not working with Calvinism. But then in this class that Dr. Jones is teaching, he is a Molinist himself, but he doesn't make the students be Molinists. He's just like, this is, he doesn't even, I think he teaches just, this is the problem of evil, the general ways to, but my main paper, my final paper that I had to write for that class, and this wasn't the assignment. He just said, deal with these 10 different problems of evil. How are you going to answer these questions? I want an essay on each of them. And so my introduction, I said, I'm going to take a Molinist approach, and this is how I think you can do it. And then I remember seeing his final grade, get an A+ on. He said, Tim, you seem to understand Molinism better than I don't want to say better than everybody else, but just like you have a really good handle on it. And it's because of that you are answering these questions really well. And so at that point, I was like, wow, there is apologetic significance to Molinism. And in this book that you have, you see the final chapter is called The Apologetic Significance of Molinism. And I've gone on even since that, and you'll see it in the second edition, but I've published also in this one a whole chapter on it where it's even updated, talking about the problem of divine hiddenness. It just seems to me that Molinism can answer. I've never seen a problem of evil that it can't answer yet. And I'm looking, whether it be natural evil, moral evil, gratuitous suffering, animal suffering, divine hiddenness, really all the problems of evil are really looking at the world and saying, here's a feature of the actual world, and it ought not be this way. It should be different, right? Basically, God shouldn't be hidden, or God shouldn't allow, if God existed, he would not let this kind of evil happen, because this evil, it should not be. And we just know it, right? And so I like to point out, well, when you say it should not be this way, do you have a perfect state of affairs in mind, the way things should be? And I'm like, isn't that, can we call that heaven? But then we start talking about, well, why would a perfectly good, loving, intelligent God allow all of this pain, evil, and suffering? And I say that Molinism has the resources to answer that. So I've published books on it now. I've published in academic journals on this topic. Looking forward to doing more. I've got another book coming out where we'll get into this topic even more. So yeah, it really kind of, as I think about it now, I started in apologetics so I could answer these tough questions, because I had that whole fighter mindset and I had to defend the sheep in my youth group, right? So I started in apologetics. That got me into philosophy. That got me into theology eventually. And that's what I got my PhD in. So I kind of got into this whole academic world through the back door. It wasn't my intent. I didn't set out as, I want to be the next scholar to contribute to the academic literature. It just kind of happened. It was never my goal. But yeah, that's the journey that I like to say I got into academic Christianity, contributing to the theological literature, stuff like that, through the back door of really top level apologetics. I kind of started that way. I'm writing a book right now with Dr. Joshua Ryan Ferris. And I like to say that he got into academic Christianity through the front door, but he sees the importance of pop level apologetics, or even pop philosophy. Helping introduce these things in a new way to new people who have never been exposed to this stuff before. Teaching, or maybe let's talk about it like you're at the swimming pool. You got the baby pool, the middle pool where most people are at, and then the diving pool where there's some people doing, triple gainers off the high dive. I kind of started out in the baby pool, splashing around a little bit. I got good enough to where I could be pretty good in the middle pool. And then I got good enough there where I'm like, okay, I might not be able to do triple gainers, but I can at least do a couple backflips off the diving board. I can spend some time in the deep waters. And then you got guys like Ferris, who he spends most of his time in the deeper waters. But then he likes to come down and be in the other two pools, and eventually, and we'll get around and splash people in the baby pool. He does pastoral work too. And so we kind of see each other. Like, I kind of started in the pop realm of things as a youth pastor who got to be able to communicate at a pop level if you're going to be a youth pastor. So that's what I was good at just right away. And then you got a lot of academics though who don't know how to communicate at all with the average person. So you got to have people like Frank Turek, who are great popularizers, really good communicators, and who can understand enough what Dr. Craig and Planiga and Hasker and all these guys are talking about, and then bring it down in a way so that people who have never been exposed to this stuff can start to understand it. I know a lot of people out there complain about Frank Turek. He's not rigorous enough, blah, blah. He's not trying to be a trailblazer, right? He's trying to get people's feet wet.
Right. He's introducing them to one, he's not dealing with deep philosophical questions. The majority of the stuff that he's engaging with is very rhetorical. And so he responds with very effective rhetorical responses that kind of catch people off guard. They're not looking for the deep philosophical, answers to these questions. And so that's not his goal. So I understand that.
Yeah. I know Frank pretty well now, and just such a good guy, and his passion, and he knows what his calling is to take these bigger, deeper topics and popularize them, and I don't know anybody that does it better, at least in some senses. But like I said, he's not trying to introduce new stuff into the academic literature, but there's not very many academics who are doing that stuff that could give a talk at a local university without putting everybody to sleep in the first 5 minutes. And so here's the deal. We need everybody. It's a big army. It's God's army, and we need people playing all these different roles. And I get really frustrated when I start seeing other people online critiquing those who are devoted to introducing these topics to college students or whatever for the first time. Now, here's my point. For me, I started in the pop level waters. And then as I would try to defend, when I first started Free Thinking Ministries, my goal was just to do pop level stuff. Just pop level blogs. I was just wanted to always be in the shallow waters. But inevitably, if let me give you the introduction to the Kalam cosmological argument. Well, inevitably then somebody is going to come and challenge that. And again, with my martial arts and competitive background, somebody's going to come and say, "Oh, well, I can beat you up on your turf." Like, well, actually, I can go another step. Let me take you there. And so I'll take them into the deeper waters, and then they're going to take me into deeper, and then it just keeps going deeper and deeper. And now all of a sudden I'm contributing to the academic literature on these topics. That was not my goal. It's just, that's how it happened. Back to Josh Ferris and I, he went in through the front door. His goal was to be an awesome philosopher, but now he sees the need to do pop level stuff too. I started out in the pop realm and then moved my way into the academic realm. And we both realized we have to be able to move back and forth. And so I think we make a good team because we do meet in the middle, and we like to go back and forth. So I don't know. We actually signed 2 contracts together. One book where we're editing a volume with multiple contributors. I mean, we got some big names contributing to this thing. And then the academic press asked Josh and I to write a mid-level book on the same topic because it's going to be a very, the one with all the contributors is going to be very academic, very dense. Definitely not an introduction to the topic. So yeah, it's just, and I love doing that stuff, and I still love writing a pop level blog about how Dr. Strange makes sense of Molinism. So I like doing it all. I don't know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So then I think this will go, let's just kind of go directly into this issue of the problem of evil, and how does it, let's do this. You've mentioned it a couple times and you've sort of defined it. How would you concisely define the problem of evil, and what does that have to do with libertarian free will?
Okay. So problem of evil, the biggest I'd say it's the biggest objection against the knowledge of God, right? So Paul in 2 Corinthians 10:5 says that we destroy every argument raised against the knowledge of God, and we take all of our thoughts captive to obey Christ. I mean, there's 2 awesome parts of that verse to consider. And 2 different directions we can go, but yeah, destroying every argument raised against the knowledge of God. Well, I would say today And that just in general, the greatest objection raised against the knowledge of God is what's known as the problem of evil. And there's these different problems of evil. The problem of moral evil, problem of natural evil, problem of gratuitous suffering, problem of animal pain, the problem of divine hiddenness. I mean, whatever you don't like about the world, you can say, well, why would God let that happen? And what about this? What about that? Right? Basically, these are problems of evil. And these are very effective as well, because we all experience pain and suffering at some point in our lives. And one thing is guaranteed: when I talk to a young audience, I always say, hey, how many of you have experienced some suffering? Most hands go up. Then I always say, I can promise you, the more time goes on, you're all going to have more and more suffering. Congratulations. But some, even young people, go through horrible suffering, especially if you're born with deformities, things like that. Why would God let that happen? Or me, even when I was a middle school kid getting beat up by the girls in front of others, I'm like, God, why would you let that happen to me? In fact, during my MMA career, my second fight that I told you I lost, I was mad at God afterwards. I mean, I was like, God, what the heck, God?
Because you were still a Calvinist then, right?
I was still a Calvinist then. I was like, what? I mean, really, I was like, I guess I still trust you, but what the heck? Why did you could have made me win, and I would have given you so much glory. I would have grabbed that microphone at the end and praised you. I would have shared the gospel, and I probably would have. Instead, my hand was killing me. It was broken. And, but yeah, why would God let my hand break and lose like that? Well, or it could have been like, how come I didn't work harder and train smarter? I wasn't ready for that fight. A lot of things that were on me. But anyway, all that to say, problem of evil usually comes down to something like that, or like this. If God is all good and all powerful, perfectly loving, perfectly intelligent and all knowing, then what the heck? Why all this pain, evil, and suffering? Why would God allow Hitler to build those concentration camps or those gas chambers? And then why would he just allow these train loads of kidnapped Jews just being executed there? Why would a good God let that happen? Or somebody was born with a genetic disease. Why God? Or a baby born with cancer? Why the heck? I mean, you see the power there. It's like, yeah, is God in control? What does it mean to say God's in control? Did God make that happen? And if he didn't make it happen, why does he allow it? Doesn't he have the power to stop this stuff? I mean, it's really an emotional argument. I mean, there's an intellectual side to it, and it can be offered well. But I think many people experience the emotional problem of suffering, and without the resources to think through it, reach the hasty conclusion that I guess God doesn't exist. And I say it's a hasty conclusion because it doesn't follow, especially if Molinism is true. So I think Molinism provides a very powerful response. And so one of the academic papers I co-authored this one with Jacobus Erasmus. And this is in response to John Schellenberg's hiddenness argument. However, it's kind of in the process of defeating that argument, it occurred to me, well, we're really taking down all the problems of evil here. And in this book, by the way, is dedicated to Frank Turek. And I was able to be one of the contributors.
What's the book? You want to read the title for people that are listening?
Yeah, it's called Faith Examined: New Arguments for Persistent Questions, Essays in Honor of Frank Turek. And so
I'll include links to any books you mention. I'll include links as well.
Yeah, this is published by Whip and Stock as well as my Mere Molinism book. And the chapter that I contributed to here, that I wrote here was large. It was based off of the final chapter of my Mere Molinism book, but it went deeper, and I discussed different issues. And so, yeah, I got divine hiddenness here. But yeah, so, and just all the problems of evil. But here's my point. As I was working on my last chapter of the book, of the Mere Molinism book that you have, that was in 2019. And that year was probably the worst year of my life. I got hit with multiple different problems of evil in my life. Good friends just betraying me in a horrible way. Like that I've never experienced before. That hurt tremendously. Other problems with some other friends. Then I got this staph infection in my knee. It was horrible. I was in danger of, like, almost, some people, I know people with the exact same problem that had to have their leg cut off. But they had to slice my knee open. I mean, I was out for months. I tell you, I like to be active and work out every day. I mean, my leg was in so much pain, sliced open. I can't even, it was just horrible. And that lasted for months, trying to recover over that, or through that. Then we don't know for sure what the deal was, but it's been hypothesized that maybe that same staph infection went through. And as I was healing with my knee, started to lose sight in my eye. I mean, there was a time where I was wearing an eye patch. And the eye doctor thought for sure I was going to lose it. And the first time I ever met this guy, went in, and he was really, I could tell. He didn't ask me if I was a Christian or anything, but I could tell the way he was talking to me about the eye. He's like, well, the eye was designed to do this and this. And I was like, And I was like, I get it. I'm getting the vibe here that he's a believer. And turns out, I went to him. I could tell he was really worried about my eye. He's like, and that was on a Friday. He's like, I need you to come back on Monday. We're going to see if this medication has done anything, blah, blah, blah. And so I went back on Monday. And the first thing he said is, I have been praying for you all weekend. And I'm like, really? And then he didn't know I was a Christian or anything. And so we just became really good friends there. But he told me, because I really thought you were going to lose your eye. I think it's a miracle that you didn't. But anyway, it was still in a lot of pain. So I'm dealing with that, dealing with my leg, my knee, emotional trauma, and so many things. And I had to ask myself, do I really believe what I'm writing in this book, in that last chapter? And this before it got published, year before it got published. But I'm like, do I really believe it, or just academic stuff? And I was like, no, I really believe it. And I was like, okay, well, if I really believe it, then it doesn't mean I have to like the pain and suffering, but I know why. And I got to tell you, I think I was able to recover through those things much quicker than most people would be able to, because I actually was like, God has good reason. He knows what he's doing. Now, let me give you an argument. I don't have my glasses with me right now, so it's going to be hard for me to read this, because I just turned 52 and my eyes just started getting bad. But let's see. I can manage, I think. So here's an argument. This is going to be tough. Okay, premise one. If God is omnibenevolent, then he desires genuine loving intimacy with humans. Premise two. If God desires genuine loving intimacy with humans, then he would create humans with libertarian freedom, because 2.1, genuine loving intimacy between God and humans necessarily requires that humans possess libertarian freedom. Premise 3. If God creates humans with libertarian freedom, then he must allow humans to experience suffering, because 3.1, suffering results from the choices of libertarian free humans. 3.2, God created a world in which he knew that unless he permitted all kinds of evil, some would not freely choose to eternally preserve the suffering-free state of affairs in the new heavens and new earth, based on 2 Corinthians 4:17. 4, God is omnibenevolent, perfectly good and loving. 5, therefore, since God is perfectly good and loving, God allows humans to experience all kinds of suffering. So, of course, I have to defend those premises, and I do. I've never seen anybody able to defeat one of my defenses of these premises after several years of defending it now. And so, but you'll see that argument that concludes that therefore, since God is perfectly good and loving, perfect in love, he allows humans to experience all kinds of suffering. Why? Because one of those sub-premises, the 3.2, I believe, refers to both human freedom in a libertarian sense and God's knowledge of what he knew would happen in eternity, in the future. So it requires God's we call that middle knowledge, what God knows, what would happen if he allows this evil or doesn't, and libertarian humans. And so once you have libertarian freedom and middle knowledge, you have Molinism. There's no other way to make sense of those two ingredients. It's really the only view that can adequately handle all the problems of evil. One reason why, I look at, the two alternating or two extremes or two, if you got Molinism in the middle, I got Calvinism on my right and open theism on my left. I think open theism does a better job than Calvinism than dealing with the problem of evil, but it still faces significant problem of evil challenges, so much so that I think they're deal breakers. And I've written on this on my website and in the academic literature, touched on it there a little bit. But I've written about it a lot on my website lately. I still think that open theism doesn't face as many problems as Calvinism does, but it's still, I say that if Molinism would turn out to be false, if I were ever persuaded that it was false, people ask me, well, would you be a Calvinist or an open theist? I'm probably an open theist, but I don't want to. I just think it'd be the best of two really bad options, But
I agree. I wrote a paper in college. We were taking a contemporary theology class, and we had to choose any particular contemporary theological position and write a paper on it. And so I chose open theism and wrote about it and wrote kind of the history of it, took basically quotes and sources from all kinds of different proponents of open theism and just quoted exactly what they said and dealt with it. And I had made the argument at the time that I believed that open theism violated God's aseity. Now, this is something that I had mentioned to you back then, and you had said that once I finished that paper to let you know. And I had finished the paper and sent it to several friends to read and review and see what their thoughts were on it. And I got a lot of notes back on it, and there were some serious problems that I needed to fix in the paper, and then I had just never finished that process. Mm-hmm. So that's why I had never ended up getting it to you, because there's some things that I needed to fix, and now I'd be curious to look back at it after several years and read through it and see if my arguments were logically sound or if just at the time it made sense in my mind with my current understanding. But no, I'm with you. I don't like open theism either.
I actually think, this get me in trouble, but I'm speaking on this topic at the EPS in Boston, and really the paper that I'm delivering is really about how Calvinism, or more specifically EDD, exhaustive divine determinism, which most academic Calvinists hold, to be more precise. But that specific Calvinistic view, not that a Calvinist has to hold that view, but that specific Calvinistic view really winds up contradicting the gospel in 6 different ways. And so we could say that, and it's not a direct in your face difference that you would spot, but it's like with Mormonism. You can see what's wrong with Mormonism first thing. As soon as you start looking into it, it's like seeing two different, like a car. The first thing you see is the make, the model, the color, right? You don't know what's under the hood, but you can tell, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you know what kind of car it was, what color it was.
My favorite illustration of that concept is if you work at a bank, then they only train you with real money.
Oh, right.
So as long as you're always handling real money, when you touch the fake thing, you don't have to look at it and analyze it. You know, as soon as you touch it, something's not right. I worked at a hotel long enough to know that's true. Like I could immediately spot a fake bill as soon as I touched it. I was like, hang on a sec.
I was just in a debate with the Calvinists. I told you I just published 5 long back and forths on my website with this guy, and he was complaining that I wasn't citing other people in our YouTube comment section, because this debate was taking place in the comments under a YouTube video. And I just took it all and published it on my website. And I'm like, well, YouTube's not the place for footnotes, number one. Number two, I am defending my position that I have advanced in the academic literature. And the exact same thing that I thought of, might have even been earlier today, is when you're defending, I've been swimming with this stuff, for 10 years now, studying this stuff every day for 10 years, knowing my arguments, so when he's like, well, what do you do with this scholar and this scholar and this scholar? I'm like, tell me their views. Tell me what you think it does. And let's analyze it. Let's examine it, because I've been looking at my stuff and how I defend my stuff for so long. I can hear now, well, this view is supposedly supposed to solve that problem. I can just analyze it, boom, right away, spot the problem. And it's what happened here. You should get that paper that you wrote out, and
I want to look at it. I'll probably send it to you too and let you critique it. I don't know. That's scary because I haven't looked at it in 4 years.
Oh, well, I'm sure. I mean, I look at stuff even that I wrote 4 years ago. I mean, I look at the reason why am I doing a second edition of my book?
Fair.
Because published that in 2020, 2025 right now is like, oof. I have so much more to say, and I should have said that differently. I should have defined that term better. I've kind of become a definition Nazi, for lack of a better word now, because I realized
Stickler
that's
on
something
semantics.
I didn't do well in my first edition. I still stand by all the big ideas and big main arguments in my first edition. I still think it's a good book, but I've become much more of a analytic theologian now. I would say when I was studying, I was more focused on systematics, and now I've become more of a analytic. We're really kind of both of them, where I'm just like, hey, what does this word mean? What does that word mean? Let's put them in an argument now. And but yeah, I told you I was going to the EPS to talk about. I remember my point, to talk about why this deterministic view of Calvinism that I used to hold is really problematic and a different gospel, at least in one sense. And with Mormonism, you can see the problems right away. It's like, oh, it's the wrong color. You're looking at when you're looking at a car, you see the color, the make, and the model. It's in your face. With the Calvinistic determinism, especially because they use the same language now Mormons use the same language too. And so you have to say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And as soon as you ask that question, boom, it's in your face. You can see the differences. You deny the Trinity. You say that there, some will even say, well, yeah, we affirm a Trinity. There's the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And Jesus is the Son of God. And they do affirm the resurrection, and all that, the historical resurrection. But they don't say that Jesus is the second person of the triune God the way we understand. But you start to see these differences right away. Now with the deterministic Calvinism, it's not like saying the make, model, and color of a car. These are big problems, but they're deep within the engine block. My next door neighbor owns a diesel shop. So even though I don't have a diesel, he's a really good mechanic. And whenever I got something wrong, I'm like, bro, can you look at my car really quick? And a lot of times he'll come over and fix it in 5 minutes. But he can get deep within the engine block. He knows things that I'll never know because I'm never going to spend time down there. It's just not my world. I'm glad to have a next door neighbor and a good friend that that lives in that world. And he'll ask me theology questions and I'll ask him car questions. But the problems with deterministic Calvinism are so bad, but they're not obvious. So I don't think that they're let them be accursed territory that Paul talks about in Galatians. When he says, hey, if you're preaching a different gospel, let them be accursed. I do think it's a different gospel, but these issues are deep within the engine block that no pastor, Sunday school teacher, or layman is ever going to see them. But one of my points is, but who does see them? We're the diesel mechanics here as philosophers, as philosophical theologians, who are going to get down into the engine block here. And if you do see it, when I'm talking to a fellow philosopher, once you see it, you're obligated to let people know. Once you see these horrible issues, I mean, it's just, you can have a beat up car, but if the engine is pristine, it's going to get you around just fine. But if you have the best looking car in the world, but you got a horrible engine, good luck with that. And I think that's kind of a good illustration of what's going on with deterministic Calvinism.
Yeah.
And I don't think Calvinists need to be deterministic, but sadly, most of them are.
Yeah. And on that topic of just talking about these things and writing about them, again, to talk up my pastor a little bit more, he has written several articles on the philosophical and biblical problems with Calvinism.
Oh, really?
And he's written a whole set of articles that I have, and I can send them to you. I'll let you see them, because you'd probably be interested.
Where's he published these at?
He had published them for the Global Baptist Times. But I've got the digital documents for them and everything else. This was several years ago.
I'd love to see them.
Yeah, I think you'd be interested in them.
Definitely.
Because he goes over things like Calvinism violates God's aseity and things like that. And it's a very philosophical take on the issues and the holes and problems with Calvinism.
Yeah.
I think you'd like that.
Cool.
But so you're essentially, the problem of evil has two kind of general categories, as I've understood it, of responses. There's the emotional problem of evil, and then there's kind of the more philosophical, logical problem of evil. That now you've dealt with both of these and extensively. But I think focusing specifically on,
as a pastor, as a former pastor, I had to deal with emotional problems all the time. That's what pastors have to do. Now, it sure helped me. I'll tell you what, when I was able, sorry to interrupt you, but
you're good.
I think this is important. When I started putting this stuff together towards the end of my pastoral career, I always hated doing funerals, but I wound up being, I hate to say this, but it sounds weird. I think being kind of good at doing funerals, because I would start talking about why God would allow this kind of stuff. I had to do 2 baby funerals for the same family in probably a year and a half.
That's horrible.
Yeah. And that's when I really started, during that time is when I really started connecting some dots with Molinism and answering these tough questions. And I think pastors who oftentimes have the personality and the disposition to care and to empathize with those who are hurting, but a lot of times they don't have, they can put their arm around them and cry with them, but they can't give them knowledge to help them at that point. And so that's, I mean, and I kind of disagree with Dr. Craig a little bit on this. I agree with his point, but a lot of times he says, hey, when somebody is suffering, they don't want intellectual answers. They want you to put your arm around them and cry with them. Yeah, they want that, but sometimes they also want answers. And with this family, with their 2 babies that died within a year and a half. And then, oh man, another neighbor of mine down at the end of the block. This is towards the end of my time at Biola, and it was right after I had stopped being a pastor. Right, I think I just started free thinking ministry, so it's around 10 years ago now. But I remember him knocking on my door, and I was kind of discipling him the last couple years before this. Got him into apologetics. He was picking up on that pretty quickly. I'll never forget. One night he knocked on my door, and I went and opened it up, and he's standing there with this look of just brokenness, sadness, and just also, just for lack of a better word, just also, I'm just going to say it, pissed off. Pissed, sad, broken, look so angry and crying at the same time. I'm like, what? And he told me that his wife was just diagnosed with cancer. He's probably 10 years younger than me, with 2 little girls. His oldest girl was in my son's grade, and I had a younger girl, probably 7 at the time. And I'd been taking him through On Guard and all that kind of stuff. And we talked about the problem of evil in the past. And he just was standing on my front porch saying, "Tell me why." And I was like, you know that you don't need to have an intellectual conversation right now. I told him this. I said, you need me to cry with you and to be there for you. He goes, I think he cussed at me. He's like, no, argue with me. I came here to argue. You need to let me know why. And I was like, come on in. And it is. I mean, the stuff that wound up in my book and stuff that I'm even writing even now, I mean, it was all that stuff because I'd been putting it all together through Molinism at that time. And this is where analytic theology and academic theology meets the real world. And his wife wound up dying a year later or so. Horrible. And he asked me to do the funeral. So even though I wasn't a pastor technically anymore, I did the funeral at the church. And big funeral. She was young, a lot of friends. And as a pastor doing a funeral, before it's open to the public or whatever, you have all the family there, and a big family, all the relatives. And so almost family took probably a third of the church, but a big church. And so I'm maybe not quite a third. It was just a lot of people. And I'm going through, before we open the doors, I'm going through reading where all the different flowers are from, who donated these different flowers, and, just doing all that stuff. And then I remember saying, okay, well, we'll go back over here for a while. We'll let people come in, and then we'll come out. And I just tell them all what we're going to do, how the order of the service was going to be. And then I said, and then we'll come back here, or we'll go to the grave site. And then afterwards we'll come here for lunch. They've made sandwiches. I just remember all these kind of things. And I said, so is there any questions on the order of things today or anything else? And this hand comes up in the back. I was like, yeah. I didn't know who it was. It was one of the relatives. I'm like, yeah, what's your question? Why would God let this happen? I'm like, oh. I said, that's a tough question. I said, I think there are answers, but I don't think right now is the time for that. We just need to mourn together. But if you want to talk to me later, we can talk about that. Somebody else raises their hand. I want to know too, why would God let this happen? I'm like, oh, you're kidding me. And then all these other hands, yeah, we want to know too. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I look at my friend, the husband of the woman who died. And he's sitting in the front, just slumped over. And I said, what do you want me to do? And he goes, they need answers. Just like, that was more scary than any MMA fight I've ever. And I was like, God, please bring to mind what you've taught me and help me to do it. I was praying under my breath and help me to be a good pastor with this. And so I don't even remember what I said. I just know it was the stuff that, I remember the big points, but I'll never forget then people coming up and just hugging me. That we needed that. We needed that. We needed. So ever since then, I was like, man, yeah, it's true. When people are experiencing the emotional problem of suffering, yeah, they do need that hug. They need you to cry with them, but they also want answers. They need answers. Answers help you heal. It does. Now, if you just go about it without the hugs and without the tears and without the empathy too, that's not going to help. But they need all of it. And you have to know how to give that intellectual side of academic Christianity in a pastoral way. But it's possible. It sounds like your pastor is the kind of guy that can do that, but that's when it hit me that this isn't just academics. It's not just an intellectual game. It makes a difference in the real world. It helped me when I was going through pain and suffering. I've seen it help others who are going through it. And so it is academic, but it's also real. And it's good for pastors to be able to have this. So I don't know if I've answered your question or answered a question you didn't ask.
No, yeah, I think that's really good. I've heard it said one time, to follow that point. There was a psychologist that was talking about, he said that when you're going through a tragedy or a trial or something really hard like that, facts are your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes your whole world can be upside down, and emotions are all over the place. And sometimes your best friends are the things that you can lock onto and say, okay, in spite of how I feel, I know this. And I have to just remember that. And I think this is important in Christianity too. I say too, but I think it's important in Christianity that we remember this, because the Bible teaches us certain things that we know to be true about our relationship with God, about who God is, and about what He has said is going to happen, and everything else, and our ability to trust Him. And when things come along that cause us to have emotional feelings, it's important to remember it doesn't matter how I feel at this moment, because that doesn't negate what God said. And so I think of one of my favorite works from C.S. Lewis is the Screwtape Letters. And he talks about whenever somebody is praying, they often, when they want to feel courageous, or they want to feel forgiven when they ask for forgiveness and all these different things. And he said one of the tactics that Satan uses is to make us think that those feelings are directly related to the reality of that fact. And so we fail to realize that oftentimes the way that we feel is completely caused by external factors. And it's important to remember, no matter how I feel, I know what God has said. And so I can trust that no matter how I feel. And I think that's I understand the want to balance that there, and be like, well, no, just mourn with them, don't try to give them intellectual answers. And I think that like everything, there's probably a ditch on both sides. You can be too intellectual and too factual, and then you just ruin that. You're like, okay, you're not hearing me and feeling me. It's almost like when your wife is trying to explain a problem and you try to give her the solution, and she's like, I just need you to hear me.
I've learned the hard way.
So there's that side. But then there's the other side too, where sometimes answers are needed. So I think that's really good. Now, you have said that in your whole case is that Molinism is the best solution to the problem of evil. And Molinism is built on this concept of libertarian free will. Can you explain what exactly that is, and maybe what the alternative? You've mentioned determinism, but what are some of the alternative views here that are competing with it?
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, libertarian freedom means that you're the source of at least some of your actions, your mental and physical actions. And then oftentimes it also refers to the idea that when you're that you really could have chosen otherwise in a given situation. Now, I like to say that if you can demonstrate that if you ever could have chosen otherwise in a particular situation, if you could have done otherwise, then that means that you are the source of at least some of your thoughts and actions. But I think the most important thing here is that you are the source. If you are and what I mean by that is think of a causal chain, or just think of a chain, and you got all these links in a chain. And so they're not free from one another, but a break in one of those links provides freedom, right? So if you're chained up, you're not free. But then as soon as there's a break in a chain, you're free. You're out. Now, what causes the break in the chain? And if you are the kind of thing that can break the causal chain, then you have libertarian freedom.
In the chain, you're referring to meaning like things happening to you. What do you?
That's a good way to put it. So think about falling dominoes. That's a good illustration. The first domino falls, hits the other one. The next domino falls, hits the next one, and pretty soon you have all these dominoes falling in a chain reaction. None of those dominoes has free will to say, no, I'm going to step out of the way and not be acted upon. So it's then inevitable, not just inevitable, but it's determined that based on the structure of the dominoes, that once the first one falls, they're all going to fall.
Without intervention somewhere.
Yeah, unless there's outside intervention. Or the kind of... Now imagine then a domino that could think and say, and move on its own, right? Say, mm-hmm. I'm not going to get hit by this preceding domino. And it steps out of the way and breaks the chain of causation. Now, mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense. Well, okay, I'm going to back up here. So let's talk about a biblical example. I've written about this a lot lately on my website. I talked about written debate I've been in with the outspoken Calvinist on social media, all about 1 Corinthians 10:13. So really 5 long blog articles that were really sections of debate with this guy. And 1 Corinthians 10:13, I've got it here. Paul writes, "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it." Other versions say so that you can escape. So, or he will provide a way of escape so that you do not have to sin, right? So here's the idea Paul's communicating here. When you're tempted to sin, all right, God promises to provide a way out so that you do not have to. So think of the last time you were tempted to sin. You don't have to tell me what it is, but you were tempted to sin, and God provided a way out so that you don't have to. And so now I ask you, this is not just the last time you were tempted to sin. Again, don't tell me what it is, but think of the last time you actually did sin. Okay? Because I know you probably don't sin very much anymore, but you're a Christian. Do you still sin at all? You still sin occasionally?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay, yeah, right. So that's what I do.
I'm not a Nazarene.
Yeah, right. So you're a regenerate Christian who still sins. Well, Paul's writing to other Christians here, and he says, well, look, every time you're tempted to sin, God will provide a way of escape so that you do not have to sin. All right, so what follows? When you're tempted to sin, you could choose otherwise and take the way of escape that God promises to provide, right? Okay, but you did sin. I asked you to think about your last sin. So according to 1 Corinthians 10:13, God gave you a way of escape so that you did not have to sin, right?
Right.
So you could have done otherwise, right?
Right.
Okay, well, if you could have done otherwise, then that means that you have libertarian freedom. You had this categorical power to sin or to not sin, and you had the power to choose to make actual one of these alternative possibilities. It was within your power. And this isn't something that happened to you, right? God didn't make you do it. Satan didn't make you do it. Antecedent, prior laws of nature didn't make you sin. No,
What do you mean?
you
What do you mean
broke
by antecedent?
prior.
Okay.
Yeah. So prior conditions, like, the weather yesterday didn't make you sin. It was up to you. You were the source, and from you, it didn't happen to you, as you said earlier. It doesn't happen to you, but from you, you chose one way or the other. And so you started maybe a new chain, right? But that started in you, from you, not through you, right? It didn't happen to you. You weren't a domino that got hit by another domino and then hit another one. So that's really, I'm trying to paint a picture of what libertarian freedom is. And here's what I think is cool. It doesn't make sense in this physical world that we live in to have this kind of freedom, right? We don't see it. I don't think animals have it. I'm pretty sure they're more reactionary. They can be trained, but I don't see there's not kind of libertarian freedom. I don't think they have it. I do think animals have souls, by the way, but that's another conversation. I think animals are.
Yeah, I mean, if you get into substance dualism and all that, then yeah. That's a whole nother subject. But
but substance dualism is, I think, what's going to answer this freedom question. Because how in the world, if we're just physical beings living in a physical world with natural laws of physics and chemistry, how in the world would we have free will? It's not like rocks and trees and plants and anything else in this world has free will to choose to do one thing or another. That can actually do one or the other at a specific moment. Now there could be randomness in the quantum realm. That's another conversation, but that's not rational. That's just random. And it seems like humans are different kinds of things that can make rational decisions and choose to do one thing or another. I think that's why we're morally responsible. But how in the world could we be free from physics and chemistry in this physical world since we're physical beings? Well, as you said, what about substance dualism? Oh, that means that I am a soul, an immaterial soul created in the image and likeness of our Creator with supernatural powers. And I can move my body. I can make rational choices. I can infer truth about theological and metaphysical reality. Nothing else can do that, right? These are supernatural powers I have when I exercise my libertarian freedom. And because of that, I can make rational choices to take the way of escape God provides in those moments of temptation.
Yeah, you mentioned the dominoes thing.
Mm-hmm.
With the what immediately came to mind is this concept of Sam Harris, what he promotes. Like basically, you're just basically chemicals bouncing around in your brain, and you're just a cause and effect machine. Basically, you're influenced by the things of the world happen to you, which causes certain chemical reactions in your brain, which causes you to think certain things, which then causes you to do certain things. And so everything is ultimately determined. And what I was thinking about is comparing that to, let's say, the chemicals in your brain acting like the dominoes. You have this row of dominoes, and you've got the chemicals bouncing into one another, into another, into another, into another. And if I'm understanding you correctly, you're not denying that there is an element of that at play in the fact that you are, like, things do happen to you, and you do react, and your brain does have these different processes. However, the thing that makes you different than the line of dominoes or purely a bag of chemicals bouncing around is the spiritual element to your soul, which gives you the ability to break the chain in the dominoes, to say, I can choose to, and we may not know how exactly it works, but we have this ability that God has given us to choose something other than just being a product of our environment. Of nature,
because you are also supernature. You are much more than just the products of nature. You have a supernatural power, and it's really amazing when you start to think about ourselves and each other, and even yourself like that. Like, I have this power. It's really pretty amazing, and it points you to God. Like, wow, I got this from God, the Creator of the universe, endowed me some communicable attributes of His. He's omnipotent. He gave me some power. He's omniscient. He gave me some knowledge. He is the definition of love, the standard of love, and he created me in such a way that I could love in return and love others. So these are these communicable attributes here. But yeah, with the idea of power, God as the supernatural creator of nature didn't just have the power to create all nature, the stuff that scientists study. He also has the power to intervene and break the laws of nature, and he's given us that power too. I've seen Dr. Craig do it once. Like, watch me use my libertarian freedom and my supernatural power to move matter. Watch. Oh, that's pretty cool. If you think, I mean, we take that for granted, right? We just take it for granted. But when you think about it, well, I did that. I'm moving my toes right now. I'm choosing to move my toes. Can you do it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that stuff that's just happening to you? Or did you choose to move? I mean, you just start thinking about stuff like that. You are choosing to move matter with just your thoughts, and you're freely choosing to do it. Some viewers might be watching like, well, that's stupid. Not really. I'm just telling you, don't take that for granted. I mean, I got a friend who broke his neck, a great boxer, took his little kid to the trampoline park, broke his neck, paralyzed. Been, it's been several years now, maybe 5 years now. Went from this amazing, ripped and shredded athlete who you would just be intimidated by to, stuck in a wheelchair now. But now he's working so hard that now he's been able to move he was just so happy when he could move his fingers and then move a little bit more. And he's getting more mobility all the time. Doesn't take those things for granted when he can choose to say, hey, I'm going to move my toes, and then he can do it. We just take that stuff for granted. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So what is the libertarian element of it? Why don't we just say free will? Why do we add the word libertarian?
Well, it's because determinists have wrecked it and muddied the waters so much. Just, if I can speak freely, because
they try to use the word free will too.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, Galatians 5:13, you've been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your selfish, sinful desires. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. So, I mean, there's this freedom and free will languages throughout Scripture.
They also use it to say, like, they'll say things like, well, yeah, of course you're free. You're free to do what you want, but you just so badly want to do X, Y, Z that's what you're freely doing, but that's been determined by God. And so,
yeah, they'll call that a conditional ability. Like, oh, well, you could have done otherwise if you had wanted to. Well, really, then like, well, how come I didn't want to? Well, ultimately, on exhaustive divine determinism, is because God determined your wants. So really, it comes down to, oh, well, hey, I moved my right hand. You could have moved your left hand if God would have moved your left hand. You're the kind, you possess the abilities that your left hand could go up, but God made your right hand go up.
It's just one step removed now.
It's
the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's like saying, oh, a puppet could. I got a puppet.
Yeah, a puppet.
All right, here he is. I like to bring this guy up every once in a while. My puppet. So this puppet has different capabilities. The puppet can have his mouth closed, or he can have his mouth open. Oh, look at that! Wow. Okay. So I just think that that's a bad argument, or to say that that's. Oh, the puppet has certain abilities. It can have his mouth open or closed. No. Okay. Look. So they call this compatibilistic freedom. You're free to do what you want. But yeah, your wants determine what you're going to do. Well, I like to say several things to that. Number one, we talked about facts and feelings earlier. I like to bring up Ben Shapiro's famous line, facts don't care about your feelings. And if you always choose your beliefs based upon your greatest desires and feelings, well, that's what woke people do. And usually what the left does. That's not rational. You follow truth wherever it leads, even if it goes against your greatest desires. That's what a rational person would do. So if you choose your beliefs based on your greatest desires and wants, then that's the epitome of irrationality. So if we're going to talk about rational responsibility, appealing to compatibilistic free will is not going to work. And then again, like you and I already discussed, when it comes to moral issues, well, you could, if they say, well, you fell into sexual temptation, you could have avoided sexual temptation if you would have had a greater desire to avoid it. But your greatest desire was to fall into sexual sin. And then you have to say, well, why did I have that greatest desire? Was that up to me? Well, no, God determined that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So God determined my desires to
So he
be
determined
one way,
the conditions that
and
caused
then
you to do
put
that.
me in that
Yeah.
place with that with
Yeah.
the temptress.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, where your definition of free will comes in. And really quick, what does the word libertarian mean specifically in this context?
Really, it's distinguishing. We use that to
Just
distinguish between compatibilistic freedom.
okay.
So the deterministic Calvinists is going, oh, we affirm free will too. We're compatibilists. We have compatibilistic free will. And so like, okay.
So
now
libertarian
we're talking about two
free will
different
kind of
things.
more
We're
like
both calling it freedom, both calling it free will. Okay, you call yours compatibilistic free will. We'll call kind of where I'm the source and I could do otherwise. That's libertarian free will.
So libertarian is in like independent in some sense, independent free will.
Yeah, where I can be the source.
Okay.
Of some of my thoughts and actions. Yeah.
Yeah. So then your definition of free will, or libertarian free will, comes in, and that is when you said antecedent or prior conditions do not determine. Otherwise, what was your definition?
So an event, I like to unpack it like this. I'll say an event is determined if antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate the event.
So sufficient. Let's break that down really quick, so we can kind of follow it. So antecedent being prior conditions. So the conditions prior could be the conditions that God set up, like we were just talking about. Yeah. Like, okay, yeah, sure, you could have done differently if you wanted to, but God set up the condition that you wanted to, and so therefore, the prior condition or the antecedent condition is that you wanted to, and therefore. So what do you mean by necessitates?
Necessitates means it cannot fail in that situation. So couple different ways to understand the word necessary. Something is necessary if it exists in every possible world. So we'd say that God exists necessarily. Possible worlds can't even exist unless God would create them in the first place, or get us to the ontological argument, stuff like that, or the Leibnizian cosmological argument. But that just means that, also it's necessarily true that 2 + 2 is always 4, even if you call it different things in any possible world. So these are necessary things. Now, things that aren't in all possible worlds can still be necessary given antecedent conditions, or prior conditions. So something, if I, in this world, if I throw a rock into the air, necessarily, what's it going to do?
Come down.
Yeah. So given the antecedent conditions, when that rock is in the air, it's going to come down.
Antecedent conditions in this case would be that you threw it for one up, and then gravity is a prior condition, and the laws of physics and things are prior conditions, and so that necessitates that it will come down.
Cannot fail.
Yeah. So and
without outside intervention.
Yeah. Right. But then that would change the prior conditions.
Right.
Because if the prior conditions were that something was going to intercept that rock or something, then obviously it wouldn't come down. Okay. So it is because of those conditions, it is necessary. It will not fail that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Is it because of those conditions?
The antecedent conditions are
causing
all you need. They're sufficient to necessitate it.
Okay.
So it means it cannot fail at that point.
Okay. So so antecedent conditions, so libertarian an event is determined, you said, when the antecedent or prior conditions necessitate that
are sufficient to necessitate the event.
Okay, are sufficient to necessitate it. Got you. Okay. So they would be insufficient if, like we said, so let's go with the rock, for example. You throw the rock in the air. You have the prior conditions of gravity and the rock obviously being propelled upwards, and then laws of physics and things like that. Now, those conditions would be sufficient to necessitate the rock coming back down. The conditions would not be sufficient for the rock coming back down if there was another condition added where the rock is intercepted in some way. Like you have somebody throw it upwards and they catch it. Well, that's another.
Yeah.
That would be, or the laws of physics were not the same, or something like that, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. Maybe you're on a moon that doesn't have the same kind of gravity so the antecedent conditions there. I don't know. I'm just talking.
Yeah. That's a good example. So yeah. Okay, let's do that. You're on a planet or whatever, hypothetically, gravity is not the same. So you chuck a rock up in the air.
Yeah.
The rock is going to just keep going forever up. Yeah. It's never going to come back down.
If that's the case, the antecedent conditions would be sufficient to launch the rock into outer space.
Mm-hmm. But the outcome of it coming back down is not different. Sufficient. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, but it would be necessitated to not come back down.
Right.
Okay. Given those antecedent conditions.
Okay. So then you're defining libertarian free will as, go ahead.
All right. Well, first you need an indeterministic scenario. So you would need a non-deterministic environment. So you would need antecedent conditions being insufficient to necessitate all events, first of all. So we're going to call that world. That's an indeterministic world. That doesn't mean that things aren't determined in that world or nothing is determined. It means that all things are determined.
Not everything is determined.
Not everything is determined. I think that's the actual world that we live in. I think many things are determined here, but not everything. And namely, human action is not always determined. We exercise libertarian freedom every day and actually change the way the world is going. We can actually make an impact on the world. We're not causes where antecedent conditions like falling dominoes are impacting us, or antecedent conditions are happening to us and moving through us, and we're just passive conduits with the experience and sensations of being active agents, which would be illusory on that view, right? We're not passive cogs, puppets, or anything like that, but no, we are active first movers. We're real agents who can choose to act apart from anything else. We can start causal chains ourselves. And we can do that because we're supernatural beings created in the image and likeness of the maximally great being who created the universe. Really, it makes sense in Christianity that we would be that we would have those kinds of powers. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness. I mean, well, okay, then we would expect it, right? So yeah, with libertarian freedom, you need a couple things. You need an indeterministic environment, and you need to be the source of your actions yourself. So you have to be the source. So it's not just if things were different, I would have acted differently. No, in this situation, I can choose to take option A or B, at least. Maybe more options, but at least at some points in my life, I can do A or B, and I'm the first mover. I can decide how I'm going to move, how I'm going to think. I can choose. Here's some real world examples that I think where it helps in pastoral counseling situations. I know it works because I used to do this as a pastor. I wouldn't technically call it counseling. We couldn't use that word. Anyway, I'd be like, you have the power because you're created in the image and likeness of God, that you can take your thoughts captive to obey Christ. 2 Corinthians 10:5, before bad thinking takes you captive, as Paul warns us in Colossians 2:8. So right now, what do you, I'd ask the student or the young man or whatever, what can you diagnose any lies that you're believing? I want you to tell me about reality. What is the truth about God? How did he create you? What was the purpose of life? Why did he create you? He created you on purpose and for a specific purpose, to love him and to be loved in return and to love others. And he created you to bring, I go through all this. I'm like, is that stuff true? Do you believe it? Do you believe it's true? And you get them to start saying yes and yes and yes. And I'm like, now I want you to diagnose, what is it that is making you depressed right now, or bringing you down? Is it Is it because you're focused on truth, or are you focusing on something that's not true? And then now take that thought captive, because right now that thought is taking you captive. Just like Paul warned us against, don't be taken captive by shallow philosophy, shallow thinking, bad thinking. Colossians 2:8. No, instead, you have the power. You're a free thinker. One of the reasons why I named the ministry Free Thinking Ministries. Like, you're a free thinker. You can choose to take those thoughts captive, those bad thoughts, those false thoughts captive. Take them captive, imprison them. Then I'd tell him, destroy them in your mind. Destroy those false thoughts straight from the depths of hell. Destroy them. Take them captive and destroy them to obey Christ. And I would encourage them to do that on a daily basis. And I said, you're not always going to be successful. Sometimes you're going to get taken captive, but make sure you fight. You're a warrior. You're not a passive cog. You're not a victim where things just happen to you. So no, you're a warrior. In fact, in the blog debate, last section of the 5 parts of this debate that I posted on my website today, I'm debating with the Calvinist. And I said that this is where the rubber meets the road here. Because even to this day, when I do lead these, they're called Maven immersive experience trips with these teenagers, and we lead them all around the country. So when I lead these groups of teenagers still to this day, even though I'm not a youth pastor, I put my youth pastor hat back on every once in a while. And I'll say, it makes a difference when the students, when the teenagers who are facing all kinds of sin and temptation in their life, when they realize that they're not passive cogs and they're not just at the mercy of things happening to them, and they're not victims, but know that God has given them power, real power to stand up against evil, that they are warriors and that they can fight and that they can be victorious and they can win. Well, when young people realize that they are warriors who can fight evil, I see them do it way more often, especially when they were just thinking, well, just see what happens to me. No. You're a warrior. You've been called to be a warrior. You haven't been called to be. If we're not warriors, at best, we are cogs, passive cogs, falling dominoes, victims of antecedent conditions.
Mm-hmm. The Bible, and you gave several examples right here, but the Bible is replete with more examples of us being commanded to use libertarian freedom and to exercise those freedoms and implying that we have those freedoms and things like that. Yeah. And we could go over tons and tons more. But what I want to do is, we've been hinting at it the whole time. I want you to explain what exactly is Molinism, because this is what Molinism is built off of.
Yeah.
Well, maybe what might help is, we've talked about exhaustive divine determinism. Basically, the idea that God determines everything that has happened and will happen. It's all happens because that's what God wanted to happen. The way that I had this explained to me.
And more than that, because he made it happen. He necessitated. Yes. God provided the antecedent conditions sufficient to necessitate everything exactly how it happens.
Yeah. I think the way my pastor explained it was, he said, he asked me the question one day. He said, does God always get what he wants? And I was like, I feel like this is a trick question,
Yeah. You can see that coming.
So, and the answer that he gave is, well, no. Calvinists want to say, yes, he always gets what he wants in every area. But we cannot say that's the case if we believe in libertarian freedom, because did God get the fact that we have libertarian freedom because he wanted that? Yes. But God would like that every soul come to know him and be restored, but that won't happen. And so, no, God does not always get everything that he wants, but he has ordained it that way. And
I would say he gets the end game that he wants.
Yes.
I can't remember if I said this earlier, but one of the papers I wrote, I said, for all we know, and this is my position, God created the one feasible freedom-permitting world in which he knew that evil would eventually be destroyed and everybody who is not trans-world damned is saved. And so with that in mind, a perfectly good, loving, powerful, intelligent being would create that world and allow everything to happen that is part of that world that leads to that perfect end game for all eternity. a world where evil is ultimately defeated and everybody's who is not trans-world damned is saved into the eternal future. So if that world with that best, that I call it the best feasible, freedom permitting world with the best eternal end game, if that world with the best end game includes holocausts, includes slavery, includes kidnapping and sexual abuse and murder and all that kind of stuff. These are all finite evils for short amount of times, right? But if it's guaranteed, not determined, but known by, and knowledge does not stand in causal relation, but if God knows it will end in the best feasible, freedom permitting end game for all eternity, then a perfect God, a loving God, an intelligent God would create that world, even if holocausts are in it, even if suffering is in it. He would create that world. So that's, again, going back to answering the problem of evil. And I use some of the language here. Got my Doctor Strange figurine up here. And I love appealing to Doctor Strange and the Avengers, because really, if you want, for those who are new here and never heard about Molinism, if you want to just get your feet wet with a good illustration and to understand Molinism, watch Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. The two most viewed movies. I think Endgame is the most viewed movie in the history of movies. Yeah, pretty sure it set the record. So it's great because almost everybody, if anybody sees movies, they've probably seen that movie. And so when you look at in Avengers Infinity War, Doctor Strange, it's not a perfect analogy, right? So let's just get that out of the way. But Doctor Strange gains knowledge of 14,605,000 possible worlds, or possible futures is the language he uses. And so 14,605,000 possible futures. And then Tony Stark, Iron Man, he comes up to him and he's like, oh, well, how many of them do we defeat Thanos? And Doctor Strange is like, only one. And the whole crowd, I'll never forget, the whole crowd, it was like, oh, it was like, and here's what's funny. Even me, I was like, 1 out of 14,605,000. Those are horrible odds. That was the first thought that went through my head. And then my son, who was a freshman in high school at the time, looks at me and goes, Dad, this is Molinism. And I was like, oh, yeah. So, crazy that he caught it before I did. I guarantee I would have got it, but he caught it before I did. And it wasn't about 1 out of 14,605,000. Those weren't the odds. This is not like the chances we have of winning are 1 out of 14 million. No, but that's what almost everybody thought that was watching it. But as soon as Ethan, my son, said that to me, I was like, oh, Doctor Strange has the power then to actualize that one world. Okay, so I'm starting to think that by the end of Infinity War, half of the Avengers are dying, turning to dust. And the rest of life in the universe, like half of life in the universe is dying. And the whole crowd is sad. And I'm sitting back thinking, this is awesome. True story. In fact, I can guarantee it. You can look at the date. I went home that night in 2018 and I wrote a blog and published it. Still up.
That's funny. I've read that.
Yeah. And you can read it. And I said, I can't remember exactly the words, but I said basically, this is what I think is going to happen. This is very similar to middle knowledge. Doctor Strange has middle knowledge here, and he actualized the one world because right before Doctor Strange dies, he sacrifices himself. Can I take it from Scripture anymore, right? But right before he dies, Tony Stark says to him, why did you do that? Why did you give Thanos the time stone? He's like, it was the only way. And then he died. It's like, oh. And I remember I was like, he's going to be resurrected from the dead. And, in the next movie, I didn't know how it was all going to play out, but I knew that he knew the end game. And what do you know? That was the title of the movie, End Game. Well, why that name? Because Doctor Strange knew the end game back in the previous movie. He had knowledge of the end game, knew that it would happen, that all these free creatures, he's not determining their thoughts and actions. We see nothing making it look like Dr. Strange is controlling thoughts and actions here. If he could do that, he would have just brought peace a long time ago. He just let free creatures act in the way he knew they would without determining them. And he knew that it would lead to the best freedom, or the best feasible, freedom permitting world in which the evil of Thanos was defeated and all the Avengers who died would be raised from the dead. All the saints would be raised from the dead and crush Thanos under their feet. Does that sound like Scripture? Because that's exactly where they got the idea. And so based on, it was what Dr. Strange knew, and he knew that by getting to the best end game was by doing the unthinkable and giving Thanos exactly what he wanted, giving him that time stone, which led to so much pain, evil, and suffering. But nobody in Endgame is like, Doctor Strange is so evil. He's worse than Thanos. He gave him he's responsible for all this pain, evil, and suffering. Well, sure, in a sense, he's responsible, but not in a moral, culpable kind of way, not in a mens rea sense. But, it means having a guilty mind. He chose the one feasible, freedom permitting world in which evil was defeated and everybody who died was raised from the dead, and so he chose it based on the best end game. And nobody says that Doctor Strange is evil. And so then I ask my atheist friends who are offering problems of evil against the existence of God, if you didn't think Doctor Strange was evil, if you were cheering for him as a hero, how come you're not doing that for God? Or why would you say that God is evil for doing the exact same thing? In fact, here's something interesting. The guy that Scott Derrickson is his name, the guy that was the director of the first Doctor Strange movie and played a huge role in developing his character and powers. You know where he graduated from? With a master's degree in theology and philosophy?
Biola
University, learning from William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland.
That's what I was saying is like these films have a lot more philosophy and theology in them than people realize, and they are impacting you whether you know it or not.
I told Dr. Craig at an EPS meeting where I was reading a lecture, and Dr. Craig was or I was reading a paper. Dr. Craig was in the crowd. It was on the problem of evil, and we were talking about all this stuff. And during the Q&A, he raised some questions, and so I was interacting with him. This was back, 3 years ago, maybe. And it's on my YouTube channel if anybody wants to watch it. Recorded it, and you can hear Dr. Craig and I going back and forth. And one of the things I say to him is, just like in the Avengers movies, and I explained this. I said, Dr. Craig, Scott Derrickson helped create Strange's character in the MCU. He was one of your students, and he took what he learned from you, I'm confident, to save the Marvel Comics universe. If it wasn't for you, Dr. Craig, the Avengers would have lost, and he's like, oh, no. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. I think a good case can be made.
Dr. Craig is the real hero of the MCU.
Yeah, he really, Dr. Craig saved the Marvel Comics universe. It wasn't Dr. Strange. It was Dr. Craig.
That's so funny. Okay,
well,
so
you want me to just break down Molinism?
Yeah, what exactly is it? We keep talking about it. What is Molinism?
Yeah. So Molinism, just in a nutshell, really, this book is going to give you everything you need to know about the history of it.
And you've got volume 2 coming out, or edition 2, I guess.
Yep.
When is that supposed to be out?
Well, I've got it done right now. So I've added all these appendices to it. The volume 2 or edition 2 is 100 pages longer than the first one. And so we're looking at 400 pages. So right now I'm trying to get rid of one or two of the appendices.
Why? Do the publishers not like the extra length?
No, it's not that. I just kind of think it's getting, I think I know what I'm doing with it now. I think I know what one I'm taking out, but I just added one more that I just wrote with the paper I just read, an academic paper against Molinism, actually. And a lot of people are throwing this around as it's supposed to be a Molinism killer. And I was like, oh, I can see some problems with this thing. So I wrote to that, responding to that paper by Rubio and Clemenhaga. And so I'm having that edited right now. I'm having some other philosophers take a look at that. If it passes, I'm going to include that one and then send it in for publication. If those that are looking at it right now think that it needs more work, I will pull it and continue working on it for an academic paper, but then just send in the rest of the book. So I'm trying to decide that piece right now. But it's about ready to get sent in for publication. So that's where we're at with that one.
Cool.
Another good book on just the history of Molinism is Kirk McGregor's book, just called Luis de Molina, and it's a biography on Molina, and
which is who Molinism is named after.
Right, Molinism. So yeah, Molinism is named after Luis de Molina. I actually hate the name Molinism. I like the name Molina. That sounds cool, but Molinism, it just, I don't know. People are like, is that dermatology or something? I don't know. So, but that's it. We got to work with what we've got. So, Molinism is named after Luis de Molina, who was a Spanish Jesuit Catholic monk, in the Reformation time, in the 16th century. So he was kind of seen as a counter-reformer, but Kirk McGregor makes the case that he's kind of a reformer in a sense, because he agreed with Luther and Calvin and others that reform within the Catholic Church needed to take place. Luther's first attempt to bring reform from within the church was to do it from within the church before he split off and started the Protestant Reformation as we know it today. But Molina, being a little bit after, I think I'm pretty sure Luther, Calvin, and Molina all did intersect lifespans a little bit. Luther would be the oldest, then Calvin, then Molina. Arminius would be even younger than Molina. But I think those first three did overlap a short period of time, but it's not like they were ever in the same room together, and they definitely didn't have each other's emails. I think history would have been wildly different if you could have got everybody in the same room.
Calvin was from 1509 to 1564. Molina was 1535 to 1600. Yeah. And then Luther was... I misunderstood my question, so it didn't give me Luther. But anyway.
Oh. No, I've got it.
There we go.
Here's the workbook. Or the study guide.
Okay, there we go. Here. Luther was 1483 to 1546. So there we go.
Okay. Yeah, I've got all that. I've got the whole timeline in here, and I've got it in the second edition, a very detailed timeline on all of them too, but I'd have to look for it more later.
Yeah.
But
anyway.
Yeah, point being, Molina agreed that reform had to happen, according to Kirk McGregor. But he disagreed with Luther when Luther left the church, and Molina wanted to continue bringing reform to the Catholic Church from within the Catholic Church. And I think a case can be made that he was largely successful. I think the Catholic Church is in a much better place now than it used to be. So I'm not saying that it was Molina alone, but anyway, Molinism, I think today is rejected unfairly because of the genetic fallacy, where you have a lot of Protestants and people in the Reformed tradition, like I am, and I still consider myself to be a Reformed theologian. In fact, I got my PhD from a Reformed university, and I had to demonstrate how Molinism was compatible with Reformed theology, which, that drives some Calvinists up a wall when they realize that I'm a Molinist who did my doctoral work on showing that Molinism was compatible with Reformed theology. And I used the Reformed methodology to demonstrate that Molinism was true. But anyway, I think Molinism is often unfairly rejected from those in Protestant churches because Molina didn't break from the church like Luther did, and he stayed within the Catholic Church. And so like, well, it's Catholic, it can't be true. Well, okay, Catholics also believe in the Trinity. Does that mean the Trinity, that we have to reject that? I mean, you're committing the genetic fallacy, and it just doesn't follow that just because a Catholic Jesuit put these pieces together that it's got to be false. But Molina basically affirmed two big truths. And this is what then I've used the term, I've coined the term mere Molinism. That, hey, I can find stuff to disagree with that Molina said. So when people say, well, Molina also thought this stuff and this stuff and this stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm arguing for mere Molinism, and that's this. One, that God is sovereign and has middle knowledge, right? He knows everything. He knows the past. He knows the present. He knows the future. He knows what would have happened if he creates free creatures, even if he never does. He's just omniscient. So number one, God has middle knowledge, and number two,
can you break down middle knowledge just a little bit more for people that have never heard this term before?
Yeah. All right. So really quick, two things you need. God. Maybe I should start with this because I named the title "Human Freedom, Divine Knowledge, and Mere Moral." So number one, humans have free will in a libertarian sense, right? Number two, God knows how humans would freely choose if he created them and placed them in non-deterministic scenarios. So think about this. Like I mentioned with the pastor earlier when I was talking to him, 1 Corinthians 10:13, Paul says every time you're tempted to sin, he will provide a way of escape so that you do not have to sin. So it follows that when you do sin as a Christian, you could have done otherwise. You could have taken the way of escape God gave you. So that means you have libertarian freedom. So then the next question is, when did God gain knowledge of that? Now, the open theist, of course, will maybe say, well, maybe right before, or maybe when it happened. All right, but let's bracket them. Almost every other Christian is going to say, well, he never gained knowledge of it. He's omniscient. And so then I say, well, did he know it prior to creating the universe? And most will say, well, yeah, he's omniscient. That's just what it means. Okay, look, if that's true, if God knew how you would freely choose if he created you, even before he even did, or even if he never did, then that's the kind of knowledge called middle knowledge. It's what would happen if. So God knows what would happen if I created Noah in this freedom permitting circumstance when he's faced with temptation. Even if I don't make him do one or the other, he knows what you're going to do. Now he could say, for hypothetically speaking, but I'm not going to create that world. Well, he still knows that he could create Noah, the free creature, and what Noah would freely do if he created. And then he said, it doesn't work like this, but then he said, oh, you know what? I am going to create. And so he creates. Now, does him knowing how you will freely choose make you choose? No. But he had this middle knowledge of what you would do if you existed in that circumstance, if he creates you, and even if he never does. He knew that prior to creation. The biblical language is prior to the foundations of the world. If God is omniscient prior to the foundations of the world and knows how libertarian free creatures within his power to create would freely choose if he creates them, that's a mouthful, but that's middle knowledge.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah. It's essentially determinists say that God knows what you would do because he determined you to do so.
Because he's already made it right. Made up his mind that he's going to make you do it.
Right. Open theists would say that, well, you have freedom, so therefore God doesn't technically know what you would do. He just has a really, really good guess.
They would say that typically he knows different things you could do.
Mm-hmm. But he does not gain absolute knowledge of what you would do until it's done.
Until you do it, yeah.
Right. And then
I don't think that's biblical. I think that has many biblical problems.
Yeah, I agree.
And like I said earlier, you're going to face some horrible problems when it comes to the problem of evil. Like, so that what helped the Molinists out is God's future knowledge of the end game, right? Like Dr. Strange, right? So Dr. Strange had the future counterfactual knowledge, something similar to middle knowledge of what would happen if he gave Thanos the time stone. Suffering would happen, but the best end game would happen. But on open theism, God doesn't have that knowledge of the future or even possible futures, or how to actualize a specific future unless he would determine it to happen. And so then the problem comes with, when it comes to the problems of evil, well, God didn't know for sure that Hitler would create concentration camps and gas chambers. Also, it kind of surprised him. Maybe he knew it was a possibility, but he wouldn't really do that. Oh, wow. Okay. He's actually making them. Well, surely he's not going to go start kidnapping Jews. Oh, wow. He is. I knew that was possible, but I really didn't think he would do it. Oh, no, he's actually taking, surely he's not going to put these Jews in the gas chamber. What? Okay. Well, now the first train load, the first car of the first train, it happens. Okay. And now a good God is in a position where it's like, well, I should probably put a stop to this, because they're going to say, well, God knows what's happening now. Even if he was caught off guard, he knew it was possible, but didn't think it would really happen. It seems like a perfectly good God would do something to stop it, unless he knew the future of the ripple effects of not stopping it, like Dr. Strange did. And so, but the open theist doesn't have access to that. Anyway, I've written a lot on that in the last few months. If people want to go to my website and check that out, the problems of evil that open theists face. But to go back to your point on Calvinism, on exhaustive divine determinism, God knows the future because he's already made it up his mind on what he's going to make happen. So he will make it happen. And so he knows what he's going to do. And so he knows the future. The open theists will say, no, Calvinist, he doesn't make people sin and do evil. That's stupid. Open theists are right about that. But then they make the mistake of saying, but if God knows what we're going to freely do, then that must determine us to do it. But no, that's a huge mistake.
That does not follow.
That's a metaphysical, logical error. Knowledge doesn't stand in causal relation. Even but these facts were true before you even existed. Yeah, but facts don't make things happen there. If we grant them ontological status at all, they would be abstract objects. And by definition, abstract objects are causally effete and inert. They don't make things happen in the physical world. So, they're not concrete objects. So they don't make things happen. So it just doesn't follow that God knowing how you would freely choose doesn't mean you don't freely choose. So that's the mistake the open theists make. Molinism is situated perfectly in the middle, but the middle knowledge view is in the middle. Makes sense. They're like, no, Calvinists are right that God knows the future. Bible's pretty dang clear about that. But we're going to say, Calvinists, you're dead wrong. We're going to say that God determines and necessitates all things. Well, that's major problems, biblically and philosophically and theologically. Open theists, you guys are exactly right. Humans have libertarian free will. I am I consider many open theists close friends and colleagues because we work together so much on the arguments for libertarian freedom and the arguments against deterministic Calvinism. So I work closely with several open theists. But then I say, but brothers, but you guys are wrong that just because God knows, they think that just because God knows what you're going to freely do doesn't mean you don't freely do it. Somehow you magically lose your freedom. That's just it's a modal error in logic to reach that conclusion. So the Molinist position is in the middle. We have real libertarian freedom. We have the real power to do, in the 1 Corinthians 10:13 scenario, we have the power when tempted to sin to either take the way of escape or to sin. God knows prior to creation what you were freely going to do, but that knowledge doesn't make you do it. So you never lose the actual power to do otherwise. God just knows what you're going to do, and it doesn't make you do it. So he can literally tell you, I knew what you were going to do, but you could have done otherwise. You actually could have done otherwise in the actual world. I just knew what you were going to do. But the open theists can't seem to wrap their minds around the fact that that doesn't negate your libertarian freedom, and you're still not the first mover source of your thoughts and actions. So, I think I like open theism better than deterministic Calvinism, even though I used to be a deterministic Calvinist. But I really am confident and justified to say that Molinism is the inference to the best explanation of all the biblical data, the philosophical data, and the only view that I've seen that can solve all the problems of evil. Open theism can handle some of it, but it can't handle all of it. In fact, it can't handle most of it, I would say. At least I haven't seen it played out that way. What do you think?
Molinism, it sits in this middle category of, it's not that God knows what you're going to do because he determined it, and it's not that God just doesn't know what you're going to do because you have free will. It's that God knows what you're going to do because that's what you chose to do. And so it's not that his knowledge determined, because people want to say, oh, well, if God knows I'm going to do it, then I couldn't choose otherwise. And it's like, well,
it doesn't follow.
No, because like if you have choice A or B and you choose A, well, God knew that you were going to choose A, but you could have chosen B. And if you decided to choose B, then God would have known that. And so your decision is what God's knowledge is based off of, not the other way around.
Yeah. And, it's like, okay, if they want to say, well, God knows what I'm going to do tomorrow between choosing a red shirt or a blue shirt. And so I'm not free, because whatever I do, he knows. And so I'm not free to do otherwise. I'm like, okay, pretend he got divine amnesia now. How do you say that?
Divine amnesia?
Yeah, divine amnesia. Yeah. Do you now have the freedom? What changed? And just because he knew and now he doesn't, did you lose, or you just got free all of a sudden? No, it doesn't stand. Knowledge does not stand in causal relation.
And the key difference between Molinism and determinism and open theism is this concept of middle knowledge, which is this idea that God has access to what we would call counterfactuals. And counterfactuals, for somebody that has not heard that term before, that refers to, and you can clarify or correct me here, counterfactuals is referring to information that could have and would have been otherwise if the circumstances were different. So, for example, the great example of this is in the Bible, is in Scripture. I love the one in 1 Samuel 23, whatever. David asks Saul is going to come down, and the people of Keilah, how do you pronounce, what is that city's name?
I've heard it pronounced multiple ways.
But he asks that.
I know what you mean.
He asks basically that if the people of that city will surrender him to Saul, if they're going to turn him over to Saul, or if they won't. And God answered, like, if he goes up, then will this happen? Will they surrender me? Will they turn me over to Saul? And God says, yes, they will. If you go up, they will do this. Well, David just like, oh, okay, cool. Well, then I'm just not going to go. And he doesn't. Well, so how did God know? Is what God said false? Because that did not happen. Was God lying? Was he guessing? I mean, he told David that if you do this, if you go up to the city, they will turn you over to Saul. And David said, okay, then I won't go up to the city. And therefore, he didn't get turned over to Saul. So God had this knowledge of these events that would have happened if the conditions were otherwise. Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that?
A friend of mine named Nolan sent me a argument that he just came up with that I thought was good. And so it's premise 1. An omniscient speaker only asserts conditionals that are true. Premise 2. Jesus, being God, is omniscient. Premise 3. Jesus asserts, if the miracles done in Capernaum had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented. Conclusion. Therefore, it is true that there exists at least one possible world in which these miracles occur in Tyre and Sidon, and they repent. And so Jesus here in Matthew says, woe to you guys. I mean, if they would have seen the kind of miracles that I'm doing here, as bad as they are, they would have repented. All right, so that's a counterfactual claim. It never really happened. But Jesus is saying if they would have seen what you guys are seeing.
It's counter to fact is why it's called that. Yeah.
And again, for viewers new to that, check out the Avengers movies when Doctor Strange says there's 14,605 possible worlds or possible futures that he could create. Right? Out of the 14,605, he excluded 14,604 and chose one to make the actual. So all those others then, that 14,604 were counterfactuals to truth. And he actualized the one world and made it actual, the actual true world in that movie. Yeah.
And also to clarify your statement about a possible world, for somebody that's also not familiar with the philosophical lingo there, it does not mean that there are actual other universes and worlds where, you did something else or Hitler was a Christian or whatever. That's not what we're talking about. A possible world is kind of a philosophical thought experiment, basically, to say that you can construct in your mind this possibility, a world that would be logically consistent if it played out a different way. And so, like, for example, there is a logically possible world where Tyre and Sidon, if they had been given like the revelation that God had given to Israel, they would have repented. Same thing with this one with David and 1 Samuel, is that there's a possible world, a good way of saying this would be a scenario that we can imagine that is logically consistent with reality, that if he had just decided to go up to this city, they would have turned him over to Saul, but that didn't happen. And so that's what a possible world is. I just figured that was always a confusing concept to me when I first got into philosophy. I'm like, what are they talking about? But I figured I wanted to help somebody out there. No, I think that's helpful to give kind of a basic understanding of what Molinism is and things like that. Do you have any where can people find your work? And then also, do you have any other books and resources that you recommend people research this subject further on?
Yeah, just Human Freedom, Divine Knowledge, and Mere Molinism. That's published by Whip and Stock. That's the first version. The next version will probably be out later this year. But again, like, there's some things, I wrote the second one for a reason. Some little things I'm changing, adding a lot more information to it. But the first book is still good, especially if you want to get your feet wet. This book, also published by Whip and Stock. Like I said, I've got one chapter in here based on the apologetic significance of Molinism, how to answer the problems of evil with Molinism, and then how Molinism is even connected to all these other apologetic arguments. I explain how the Kalam can help us understand things about Molinism, how the fine-tuning argument presupposes middle knowledge, or at least something close to it. The moral argument is connected to it, the ontological argument. There's just so much. Another reason why I think Molinism is true is it's how all these different strains of thought and apologetics arguments and philosophy and theology, all these things come together and work perfectly with Molinism. That's why I say that Molinism is the inference to the best explanation based on all the data. That's the last sentence of my book, something along those lines. But no, I've got with the new edition coming out, the second edition coming out, and then two other books that I just signed contracts for. Those aren't going to be out for a while, but I got my work cut out for me. But in the meantime, my website, freethinkingministries.com or freethinkinc.org. Again, that's freethinkinc.org. And then our YouTube channel, Free Thinking Ministries. Follow us, subscribe, ring the bell, all that kind of stuff. My colleague, Josh Klein, and I he's a PhD student in philosophy right now, and a PhD candidate, and he's going after his dissertation is Molinism related. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag on exactly what he's doing, but it's pretty cool. And yeah, we try to put out at least a couple videos a week there, and I'd like to do speaking. If you want me to speak down in your church, text us, let me know. You said you went to school in Oklahoma City, and I'm there all the time because my in-laws are there. So maybe we'll meet up in OKC sometime.
Yeah, and if you're ever down in Texas, let me know. We'll have to get together. It's been a blast talking to you, and a great conversation. I've enjoyed just the time, and thank you for giving me your time, your afternoon, and really enjoyed it.
Well, I had a blast. You asked great questions. You got me just thinking about so many things and stuff that I wasn't even planning on talking about today. But yeah, you got the real, I don't know, the real Tim Stratton on your show today, talking about all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, well, I'm glad you came on. We'll have to do it again sometime, and
I'd love to. I'd be honored.
I enjoy it. So
I could be a little more focused next time, maybe. I don't know.
That's all right. It's fun. I enjoy the kind of laid back conversations, getting to know you, and it allows the audience to do the same. So
yeah,
that's pretty cool. All right. Well, with that, I guess I will say to everyone else, have a great day, and we'll see y'all next time.